The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerf Herder Chandler and Jim Kaiju Baker. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
We are at 100 episodes, everybody.
What? That's
Unbelievable.
crazy. Have you a party hat on?
I do. And today, a special guest today.
She's back! Yay!
And she
For the
was
100th episode.
Your correspondent from the foreign tundra.
Yeah, we were just comparing weather conditions.
I know, you'd think that we were on opposite ends of the globe, but we are
You're on
not.
Hoth and we're on Tatooine right now. That's basically what it comes down to. Yeah.
We, by all rights, we should be as cold as Christina is right now in
wish I was
Chicago.
cold.
Yeah.
So like 40-degree difference between our locations.
Yeah. And we're not that far removed from each other.
But again, there's nothing wrong.
No.
Don't believe in science. There's nothing wrong with this.
Just
Everything's fine.
Keep moving along, kids. Keep moving along.
This is normal for January. Yeah. So we would like to actually, before we get ahead of ourselves, with our episode 100, our epic episode 100. I've been looking forward to this for months on end. The email is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. If you're in Oregon and listening to this right now, let us know why.
Or on Twitter.
That's true.
Yes, Jeff, I've been all over Twitter. I really need you to
awesome.
log on and look at what I've put up there.
I
Because
don't know if I
pleased.
want to know, because I do stuff on Instagram that you don't see. So it's like we're all like working in a vacuum here.
I was so suspicious of Twitter right up until 2 weeks ago.
And now you're a junkie.
Now I'm a junkie. I have
Now
to look
you're a
at it like
junkie.
every time I pick up my phone. I have to look at it.
Well, as long as we're going around social media platforms, when we first started this show, like we would come on and beg people to give us their opinions and tell us what they think.
Mhm.
And we may want to rethink that now because we have this community on Facebook that has just exploded. And boy, are people telling us what they think. It's not necessarily a good thing.
Because of this, I think a rewatching of The Crimes of Grindelwald is in
You're
order.
being strong-armed into that,
Yes.
dude.
Well, we did not appreciate that movie to its fullest extent when we first watched it in the theater.
Mhm.
And we've been taking a task for that
Yes.
recently.
Just
I
your
promise-
opinion, man.
I know. I promised
Yeah.
I would rewatch. Now, this is for my cousin Lauren, who I love dearly.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
Lauren.
So
Oh.
I promised that we would revisit it in some
Okay.
way, shape, or form.
Well, she also called me out because I made a reference to Little Mermaid and I used the word dinglehopper, and it's not a dinglehopper, it's a dinglehopper.
Dingle Hopper.
It's a dinglehopper.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the fact of the matter is that I had this funny retort, and then I said, you know what? I'm not even going to go down there. But if I remember correctly, the joke fell flat as it was because neither Jim nor Mike knew what the hell I was talking about.
No, there was crickets, and I should have
Yeah,
put that sound effect
Right?
in there.
So all of a sudden, it's a dingle hopper, not a hopper. And then she made some reference about David Hasselhoff. So I was going to say, well, Scuttle didn't realize that this is like a unique, one-of-a-kind dingle hopper that was used exclusively on David Hasselhoff's chest hair during his years on Baywatch.
End of the
But yes.
story. We have a community now on Facebook.
Yeah, so you could go to facebook.com /TMI podcast 2018 and join the club, and then you can tell us what you think of this episode.
So I want to share Christina's big news.
That was part of my news.
Oh, that was.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
That is part of my news. No, go. Let's go.
I'm sorry.
Let's
And
get into the news. You can have the first
Yeah,
news item
yeah.
of the episode 100.
We are promised, because a deal just went through with Berkeley, 2 new books that they have acquired. So please tell us about them.
So one of them is going to be a Dark Sleepy Hollow reimagining, and the other one is a book called Near the Bone, and it's about a woman who lives in isolation with her abusive husband on top of a mountain, and there's also other kinds of monsters there.
Oh my!
Ooh.
And that's all we'll leave it at.
Now, are all your
Yeah.
books in the same universe?
I was so gonna ask that. At what point are we gonna get like a whole an Avengers series where all these characters come together?
Like, are we going to see the
she's shaking her head.
monsters
You're
from the
shaking your
girl in
head?
red? Yeah, is it the monsters from the girl in red? They're going to be in this
Yes,
new
yes.
book too?
This is
No.
no, it's gotta
Yeah.
happen. It's gotta happen.
Yeah. I think they're all at different
She's like-
places. Yeah.
Uh-oh. No,
No, I can't see myself doing like a super team. Of,
Right,
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
you know.
See, Jim and I are in the
I
same
know. Like
wavelength.
you could have Alice, Hatcher, Ichabod. You could have the whole team.
Yes.
It would be like that Sean
Oh.
Connery movie, The League of Extraordinary
yeah,
literary
gentlemen.
characters.
Extraordinary Gentlemen. Yeah, that's based on Alan Moore
literary
comic.
characters.
Yes,
that was the
yes, it
original
is.
title, by the way.
So
Speaking-
are
yeah.
you steeped now? Obviously this is going to be your own take on the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, as all your
Yeah.
reimaginings are. They're not the original story; they're your story. But do you steep
Right.
yourself now in Washington Irving so you can at least use some of the same motifs in your story?
Yeah, I mean, I try to keep it fresh. It doesn't happen at the same time as the original story. It's a descendant. I love Washington Irving stories, which is, I grew up in the Hudson Valley. So like I grew up with those stories, and for me that was just part of childhood. And I remember my dad telling me a story like of Rip Van Winkle when I was young, and there's certain elements of the story that I would try to retain. Washington Irving had a really dry humor, which probably is not immediately apparent if you've only seen like film adaptations of his stories, but especially the sketchbook stories are like very mocking of the characters in the stories. Yeah, which is just something that I really enjoy about his work. But yeah, I mean, when I go into a project, I'm really just thinking about my own story. I'm not necessarily thinking about how to, make it connect with something that's already existing or anything like that. So yeah.
So my offer for you to come down, because I live about 15 minutes away from what used to be Terrytown, now it's Sleepy Hollow. We could do like reconnaissance and take some.
I don't think it's going to be very similar to my set.
I just geographically, maybe at one point your character could cross over the new Como Bridge, formerly the Tappan Zee. But my sister-in-law, who actually grew up in Terrytown, is named Katrina after the character.
Oh, really?
Yep, Katrina Von
That's
Tassel.
awesome.
So there you go. I gave her a shout.
I hesitate to ask this, but what is her husband's name? Is it Ichabod or is
it is not Ichabod. It's Gerald.
Her husband would be Brahm anyway.
We've been schooled already, Jim.
Yeah.
Not even on social media.
Sorry, guys.
So that's great news. That's awesome.
Thank you.
That is.
Congrats.
Yes. Have you been fretting over this for some time, or
the contract?
Yeah, has this been in the works for quite some time?
Yeah, it's been in the works for like 5 months.
Wow.
Really?
I'm assuming that's a long time, huh?
Yeah, it's been a process. So,
Okay.
but
it's great news. Great.
Yeah. Cool. We got a scoop. Speaking of news, you want to do some other news?
Sure.
Let's see. Batman is going to be in the next Thor: God and Thunder.
Christian Bale, right?
Christian Bale,
yes,
is apparently set to play a role, but I guess it's anyone's guess who it is or is going to play. I don't know. They're keeping that under. I don't know. Why? Because you're going to immediately recognize him as Christian Bale, unless he's some alien creature that's in prosthetics and makeup and. He talks like this.
Yeah, well, you could have said the same thing about Kurt Russell in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Yeah, but
that
Kurt
didn't.
Russell's Kurt Russell.
That didn't diminish my enjoyment.
I'll
give him a chance. Christian Bale is a great actor.
Fair enough.
I don't know.
Who is he playing?
Well,
I think Christian Bale can
Yeah, he is very malleable.
Sink into.
You are right.
Yeah.
He's playing, if you ever see The Mechanic, he's just straight up scary.
The Mechanic is very painful to watch, and I think he's never recovered from that. He lost so much weight that I think he's forever looked a little gaunt after that movie, even when he bulked up for Batman.
But even after Batman, didn't he gained significant weight for that one? Didn't he play Dick Cheney?
Oh,
Vice?
Yeah,
and he did a damn convincing job. So.
And Taika Waititi is directing again.
Yes,
so.
I know. So he may throw us a curve, and you might not even recognize him. So, but
and
I thought that was interesting.
I just want to say anybody that's going to be on the set of Thor, is it Love and Thunder?
It is Love and Thunder. Keep your mouth shut.
Keep your cell phones on at all times around him. Please do us a favor.
Oh, that's a gift that keeps on giving. That little. What was he filming? Terminator.
Terminator.
Yeah.
Yep.
He just loses his cool. So we'll stay in the superhero universe here. New Mutants, which was set to be released 2 years ago, is finally being released in theaters April 3rd.
Yeah, my son wasn't born when they finished this movie, right?
Yeah, it's been a while. D23, there was a newsletter that dropped, and it was confirmed that this is an official Marvel Comic Universe movie. They're implying that this is going to be our first taste of mutants in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And then a day later, it was pulled. So they haven't made up their mind. I don't know.
So the movie was made before the deal.
Well,
right?
it was a Fox. Yes, so it was a Fox movie. Obviously, it was part of that merger when Disney took over Fox and all its properties, and it sat there. And there was talks that they were going to reshoot it, and then they decided they're just going to release it the way that it was shot. But the D23 newsletter indicated that it is going to be connected to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then they redacted it. So who knows what the hell is going on. But we're finally going to get it, which is interesting, because it looked like for a while it was just going to drop on streaming service. It wasn't even going to be released in the theater.
So are they releasing it in the spring of this year?
April 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that we will need to at least go see it.
It's trending towards the horror.
Yeah, if you're familiar with
here.
the early run of New Mutants with Bill Sienkiewicz, how do you say his name?
Sankovich?
It deals with Danny and the demon bear that killed her family. So it looks like it's going to kind of pick up some of that story thread.
And the reason why it was delayed for so long was actually because of the horror elements.
Right.
So the screenwriters and the director had wanted it to be kind of a horror story, and they shot the film, and then the studio saw it, and they were like, you can't release this, it's not family friendly. And then weirdly, so they went back, they did a bunch of reshoots, and then weirdly the studio decided to release a horror movie type trailer to maximize. It was right after It had come out, the first chapter of It, and they were like, oh, this is doing really well, so let's release this trailer that will sort of build on the excitement around It. And then people got really excited about the movie, and then the studio realized they didn't have a horror story anymore. So they went back and added the stuff back in.
What did we do? Oh my gosh.
So what is it rated? What is it rated at this point?
I don't even know if it is rated yet. That's a good question.
Yeah, I think part of the issue too was the original rating was supposed to be R. And they were not, again, they're always worried about family.
Yeah, but it was Fox. I mean, Fox they'd already proven R-rated with Deadpool. So,
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, like why just because it's a superhero genre does it have to be family friendly?
But as we know, kids find their way into R-rated movies.
That is true. We've all been.
And I really wish it wasn't like this, but you would think that people were policing this. It doesn't. No. Doesn't happen. Nobody cares. So
no, not like back in the day.
No.
I'm not seeing a rating. So
I just hope it's not a big jumbled mess at this point.
Well, that's the thing is that you almost expect it to be a mess, but what you hear that's been sitting on the shelf for 2 years, kind of like, all right, what's going on with this? I guess we'll find out in April.
Yeah.
The other news. Anybody familiar with the movie with Warwick Davis, Willow?
Yes.
I've heard of such things, yes.
You have heard of such things. Well, apparently, business is open. According to John Kasdan's Twitter account, they're in pre-production right now for a TV series, which I'm assuming is going to be Disney Plus.
It is going to be Disney Plus. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So Warwick Davis has gone on record that he's very excited to be attached in any way, shape, or form. But other than that, we really don't have any storyline. I would assume since that movie came out, 86?
88
somewhere in there.
I want to say
88. Yeah. So you would want to at least deal with the passage of time and probably like a new generation, whether Willow is like this grand master wizard at this point or not. So maybe he's holed up on an island with Luke Skywalker drinking blue titty milk. I don't know. Let's hope not. Right? That's cool. And then I'm going to end on sad news, which is this actually ties directly into our second feature today, but Buck Henry just passed away.
Henry,
yeah. Obviously, if you're a fan of Get Smart, you know that name. And it's attached to pretty much a lot of Mel Brooks movies, right?
Yeah, and he was a regular character, or not character, but host of the first 5 seasons of Saturday Night Live. So if you're
Gotcha,
familiar
yeah,
with
right,
those
yeah.
early seasons with the classic cast of Belushi and Aykroyd and Bill Murray,
Yeah.
he was all over that and
Right.
left his mark.
Yeah,
And also, I
sad.
have to call out that he plays a big part in The Man Who Fell to Earth. So there's a big Bowie connection with Buck Henry as well.
There you go. But he did win Best Comedy Writer for his screenplay of What's Up, Doc, which we will talk about later in this episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sad, but that's our news.
So I have a it's not really news, it's like a news-related question. So have you guys seen the trailer for the Call of the Wild movie?
No, we talked about this. I talked about it like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I
just saw it for the first time.
And your reaction is, what the F am I watching? What is going on here?
Well, first of all, like, we saw it before 1917, which I was like, why are they even showing this before
Right.
1917? Like, this doesn't seem like the audience. But, like, why couldn't they have a real dog?
Yeah, see? That was because I'm like, am I supposed to take this seriously? Because the dog's got like Scooby-Doo mannerisms where he's like looking at Harrison Ford like,
Yeah.
Ray Solo, let's go.
Yeah, I understand if it's, like if it's a Doolittle situation where you've got an ostrich and a polar bear, you can't really train those
Correct,
two
right.
animals.
Yeah.
Right. But, like,
But
you can
no,
train a
it was-
dog.
And it's very obvious that it's CG. And it's, I only saw the trailer once in the theater. I can't remember what it was attached to, but Jim did not, it wasn't attached to your screening, whatever movie it was that we saw. And it was just like, you're looking at it going, who's the audience for this? Because it looks, Harrison Ford's playing it straight.
Yeah, I know. It looks so bizarre.
If they're keeping it true to the book, the dog's heroic.
Maybe Harrison Ford doesn't want to work with animals. And that was the make or break. He's like, I'm not working with a dog. I'm not.
Too many years with Chewbacca. He's like, I'm done. Yeah.
He's still trying to get the smell out of the cockpit of the Falcon. Come on.
Yeah, right. Hey, get a little carpet cleaner. You're good to go. There we go.
All right. I'm a little bit nervous to get into this movie. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to do it justice. This is one of the best movies of all time.
But here's the thing: is we've already talked about this.
We have, but it was such a ill-conceived and thrown away discussion.
It was. I
want to erase it from our history.
Did you go back and listen to?
No, I don't like to listen to those episodes.
Because it just makes you mad.
No, it makes me think I shouldn't be doing this at all once I listen to those episodes.
Oh.
Yeah, that's not. Well, listen, we are where we are right now.
So what I'm talking about is, of course, Ridley Scott's 1979 original masterpiece, Alien.
Masterpiece.
Yes.
A masterpiece. 5 bucket.
5 bucket, definitely. So this is not only our 100th episode, but it's also a 5 bucket episode all the way. So
absolutely.
And again, before we start talking about Alien, Jeff, there was a similar early episode where we just kind of threw away a discussion about Raiders.
Dude, I'm so on board with that because I thought the exact same thing, which is we need to give
revisit
Raiders.
that too.
Yes, I agree.
So that's a future episode right there.
Yeah.
But
that is
but yeah,
so
today is Alien. Now, just a little bit of background of that original TMI episode. We talked about that, I think, in tandem with Deadpool 2, which was, again, just a hackneyed. There was no effort to tie those two movies in whatsoever.
Well, what was happening was that we, because there were 5 of us, we would kind of like pull the roulette wheel, and each week a different cast member would just choose
a movie for everybody to watch, right?
Right, correct.
So,
good call on that one.
And so our 2 youngest members, they watched it, and I was so excited because they had never seen it before, right? And
yes,
so
correct.
I wanted a fresh perspective on it because I had seen it thousands of times at that point, and even more today.
Right.
No, they half watched it while they were doing their chores. They told us it was like a Close Encounters thing where there was like, why did you make us watch?
Yeah, it was so slow and plotting. I remember that kind of like that commentary. Which
Not as good as Super Mario Brothers.
No. Christina's sitting there. Obviously, you didn't get back to that episode, Christina.
No. I mean, I think I've listened back. I don't think I've listened back to like the earliest episodes that you guys did. I think I started.
Thank goodness.
Somewhere. there was only 3 people on when I was listening.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
You can go, I
started
think you can
listening.
go back as
Yeah.
far as the Saturday morning cartoon episode, which was the first episode that Jim and I did exclusively together, and realized pretty quickly we can do this without anybody else.
So that discussion, I wanted to end it quickly after that revelation came out, because I'm like, this can't get any worse than
It's
this.
disheartening.
So, yeah.
I mean, that's part of the show is to kind of, share these movies that are near and dear to us. And yeah, sometimes it backfires a little bit, but that was like they brought nothing to the table,
I wish my 13-year-old could participate in this conversation, because I'm going to bring this up later when we talk about different aspects of the movie, but last year we watched it for the first time with him. I think it was really exciting for my husband and I, because we were almost not watching the movie so much as we were watching him to see how he would respond to certain things in the film. And yeah, it was almost like, after a certain point, like I can't even remember the first time I saw this film. It's just sort of like in your memory.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I was trying to pinpoint that too, and I can't.
I know exactly when I saw it, because again, it was HBO at my grandfather's house. He had gone to bed or whatever. Little tiny console TV on the floor, probably weighed 500 pounds, and it was just dark. It was very dark.
And as we'll get into later, I think my memory tricks me often with Alien, because I've been posting some stuff on Facebook and Twitter
between the comic, the graphic novels, and
that because it was we couldn't see it in the theater.
Right.
We had to wait until it was
they
on
still
HBO.
made a toy.
Yeah, yet they still made a toy, but in order to keep the kids covered, I think they knew exactly what they were doing. There was the graphic novel that was released when the movie was released. There was the picture story, which had like over 1,000 pictures, and it was like an illustrated novel, but with actual photos from the movie. So it had the chest burster, it had all that gory stuff, but it was available for any kid to buy, and I had it. My parents didn't bat an eye, never looked at my books, right? So, and I had the Alan Dean Foster novelization. So I knew that story back to front that summer that it was out, but I never saw it. My memory tricks me that I saw it earlier than I actually did, was I already knew it.
Was that the movie that you and your friend tried to sneak into? The R-rated one? It was, right?
I sorry for all the TMI listeners that have heard the story at least 5 times already. But my friend and I remember my friend Kevin, we were 8 years old when Alien was released. And we went to a local theater in Poughkeepsie. It was a double theater. I forget the name of the theater. But they were playing Alien in one and the Muppet movie in the other.
It's about as far removed. Yeah. Chest burster comes out.
And we were
Kermit.
dropped off. I think my mother dropped us both off, and we went to go see the Muppet movie, which we watched and we enjoyed. Right, so he ended, and I just nudged him. I'm like, let's sneak into Alien, and it was a wide open lobby. The 2 doors of the theaters were open for everybody to see. Not that they were closed, but everybody could see the 2 entrances. So I don't know what we were thinking, tiptoeing across the lobby in plain sight of everyone,
like Scooby and Shaggy.
Yep. And trying and like opening the door a crack, and then the usher's hand fell on my shoulder, and he said something to the effect, "Where are you going, boys?" and scared us, and we ran out of the.
There you go. And I never went back.
Yes. So yeah, that's as close as I came to actually seeing it in the theater before the re-release. Actually, in 2003.
I was going to ask you. I'm sure back in the day they did re-release these things.
Yeah, no, I must have seen it on HBO, and later on they broadcast it early in 1984 on ABC, and I taped that on VHS and wore out that tape. I watched that over and over and over again.
Did you fast forward through the commercials?
I did, but I would probably want, if I still had it, that's probably the highlight for the commercials from 1984. And I would dare say that surpassed Star Wars and Empire in my limited mind frame back then. So I was all about Alien. That was my favorite movie, bar none. So talking about this today is just going to, I'm sure, bring up a bunch of emotions in me.
It is TMI, so you're allowed to cry. Go ahead. Tear up, Jim. It's 100th episode. Let it all out.
Before we get into it, so that's my memory of the release. I remember it being the big sci-fi because we had Star Wars in 77.
Yeah,
we had Superman in 78, and Alien was to be the big sci-fi movie of 79, but no kids could see it. So that's why everybody was interested in it. that were of that, 4th, 5th grade level. So that's why those books and adaptations were so popular amongst us, because we knew the story. And I think that's maybe why they took a chance with that toy line that came up, which didn't do so hot. So now,
No.
Jeff, Christina, do you guys remember that summer when it came out? Or?
I remember specifically a kid in the back of the bus who was older than me reading the novel, because I do remember the cover with the little cracked egg and, in space no one can hear you scream. But I don't remember seeing trailers for it. I don't remember really knowing what it was. But one of the little Sugar Creek / 7-Eleven corner stores that we had a pretty robust magazine stand. And I remember it had probably was either Fangoria or Starlog, but it was an alien specific magazine that I knew I couldn't purchase. And I gave my aunt money, who was only a couple of years older than me, and she went into the store and bought it for me. And it was just a little black and white magazine. And like you said, you get the pictures and whatever, and you get a sense of what was going on. But other than that, it wasn't until it showed up on HBO that I watched it or cared about it one way or the other.
I'm a little bit younger than you guys, so I was only 5 when it came out in theater.
So you saw it twice.
So I don't remember the theatrical release at all. I only remember it being on video.
Yeah. I almost want to say that it wasn't until Aliens came out that I went back and probably appreciated Alien, because Aliens was that was 86.
Right.
Yes.
I was in college at the time, and that was probably one of the first movies I remember actually sitting in line in Queens waiting to go see.
When Aliens came out, I was probably shaking, just waiting in line to see this movie. I was so excited to see it. But still, Alien is, I think, far superior. I don't want to open a can of worms here, but
they're two different movies. They're two different type of movies.
Yes.
You got the same, characters and universe, but they are two completely different animals.
And it's almost like, DC versus Marvel. You got your Alien faction and your Aliens faction. And to me, it kind of tells me if you're a good person or a bad person.
Oh, it's as simple as that. Well, what if I like Alien 3?
These are the jokes, people. I don't mean to offend anyone.
I'm offended. How dare you?
But let's get into it. Okay.
Let's go.
Alien, directed by Ridley Scott, who was known at that time for commercial work.
Commercials.
And for The Duelists, which is a period piece, lovingly photographed, cinematography, beautiful. So when he came on to this, because there's a whole storied history, Dan O'Bannon wrote the story, and he had a large part in making Dark Star with John Carpenter. And in a lot of the stuff that I watched leading up to this show, there's the great new documentary called Memory, which we were just discussing before we started to record.
Yes.
Which has a lot to do with Dan O'Bannon, because his widow is one of the major interview subjects in this movie. She was saying how, and with archival footage of him saying that, Dark Star was great, but you look at that monster and it's a beach ball with feet. Right. So
that was a comedy, correct?
It is a comedy.
It is a comedy, right?
What if I made Dark? So his thing was, what if I made Dark Star as a really serious sci-fi / horror movie? And he wanted to make a good movie. The movie was actually called Memory for some time. Yeah. And that had the basic story of a small crew of astronauts breaking down on a planet, investigating an SOS. And then as the story progresses, they start to lose their memories. So it's almost like a Thing type scenario where they don't know who the other is. And then it turned into Star Beast, which is much more of like a Roger Corman-y B type.
Especially when you see the monster designs, some of those in that documentary, some of the sketches and the character designs. I mean, it was straight up a monster. It isn't what it ended up being, which is a much more elegant, beautiful.
And you can tell,
creature.
And they even say it. His widow even talks about it, how he was terrified of bugs, especially cicadas, because a lot of those drawings in Memory look like cicadas, and they are terrifying. They completely are.
Listen, they got these that wasp that lays its eggs inside, the unsuspecting caterpillars, and then it just explodes. Mm-hmm. That all plays into.
I know
the
the caterpillar comes back to lunch with his family and starts choking, and it's terrible. It's terrible. So we move on from Star Beast, and it actually was pitched to Roger Corman at one point he gave the impression that the script was too good for him, that it was like he in some way valiantly passed it along. This is too good for me.
Right. Yeah.
Give it to someone else.
Yeah.
While I'm sure it
So
maybe
you
it was
can
a
make
little
a great movie. Yes.
So, but that's exactly what happened. It eventually made its way to Ridley Scott. And I think everybody involved saw the potential here with Ridley Scott as the director. And it certainly lived up to that.
Well, they had in the artist H.R. Geiger. I always refer to him as Giger.
I think that's how you
Giger is how you say it.
Giger is,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
But he was involved at one point, the product before Ridley Scott got involved.
Mm-hmm.
And then walked away. But then when Ridley Scott got involved, started looking at some of this guy's works and some of his early concept things, like, dude, this is it. This is what we need to do. Because if you're familiar with Giger's work at all, it is very erotic in a lot of its, but it's techno erotic. Is it? I mean, there's a term probably for it as far as, because it's a very organic looking creatures. But yeah, he tends to. I mean, even on a ship, the openings are very vaginal, I guess, for lack of a better term. It would have been a different movie if you had a more horrific looking monster of the week creature. This thing elevates the storyline.
And I remember my father went to go see it with a bunch of his buddies because he is, and still is, a huge science fiction fan. He took me to see Star Wars, Superman, all those movies of the 70s and 80s. I was there with my dad. So those memories are very closely tied to him. Now, obviously, I couldn't see Alien with him, but he saw it probably opening or second weekend with his friends. And I had already read the novelization, so I knew the story. But the novelization, sometimes you would get pictures in the novelization. Right. Sometimes you wouldn't. Now, I hadn't seen any photos of the alien itself this early on. So I remember giving him the Third Degree. What did it look like? What did it look like? And he said, I can't tell you. I don't remember, because just put yourself in the mindset of seeing this for the first time and not knowing what the alien looks like. They only show it to you in bits and pieces here and there.
No, you never really see a straight up, not like Aliens, where these things are, en masse, and they're beautifully in the frame. This thing was always like off to the side. It was backlit. You would just get like those.
And when you do see it, it's just for like 2 or 3 seconds.
Yeah, just enough to scare the living shit out of you.
And then you see it in its full glory at the end, but still, it's not, the camera doesn't stay on it. Maybe when she's shooting it out of the airlock, that's the one
Yes,
time.
Correct. You're right.
But but it was funny because he could not tell me. I tried to pin him down, and he's like, I can't. I can't tell you.
Did you give him like a pad and pencil? Like, draw for me. Show me.
So the story, I'm sure everybody is very familiar with the story of Alien, but it's 7 space truckers, as Ridley Scott likes to call them. And now they're coming back from, I assume, some far-flung planet that they're getting mineral ore from, because the Nostromo is their spaceship, and it acts as like a tow truck or a tugboat of some kind.
Yeah, because this mining thing was pretty massive.
Yeah, so it's pushing along like a mini city in space.
Yeah, it's a beautiful model.
Yeah,
absolutely beautiful.
Similar to like an oil refinery in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, basically.
So that was always my question as a kid. Like, where were they coming from? Is there like a settlement that like way out in the far-flung reaches of space that they dock at and they talk to people and they get the stuff and then they're on their way back? And that this LV-426 is in between somehow. So that stuff just always fascinated me, and it still does. Like the stuff that you didn't hear about in the movie or in the novelization. Those things that your own mind has to fill in.
But that's what's great about the fact that you're thrust into these people's world, but you pick up these pieces and you're left to kind of fill in the blanks. Like, you get it. They're truck drivers. They're rough and tough. They're doing this for a paycheck, basically.
Prometheus would be a completely different discussion, but you realize, okay, somebody that watches Prometheus, which takes place pre-Alien, yet their ship is so much more pristine and modern than the Nostromo. But even in 1979, Ridley Scott is saying that I wanted something that was completely broken down, like an old truck. So they don't have the top of the line facilities. Or
they were. I mean, Lucas did that with Star Wars as well, which was that used universe. And then you get to the prequels and everything's shiny and new. But right?
Yeah. So we get this setup that they're on their way back, on their way to Earth. And it takes like the good part of a year for them to make this journey in the Nostromo. So they're in hypersleep for most of the journey. And at the beginning of the movie, they're awoken out of hypersleep by the ship's computer, Mother, who controls the operations of the ship. And the reason being, they're not back in our solar system yet. They are still 10 months away, but she's woken them up because she's picked up an SOS signal.
You couldn't have just woke one person up?
I don't know.
Why
I don't know if you can.
Why
I
had to
think
wake
you
them
gotta
all
wake
up?
them all, yeah.
How could they get
one.
down to the planet? I mean,
I
like,
don't know. It just seems like it's like, thanks,
Yeah.
Mother.
Well, Kane is the most curious of them. I think probably you would want to wake just him, but he'd have to tiptoe and not wake everybody else up. And Parker is not agreeable when you wake him up in the morning.
He was pretty grumpy.
Yeah. So they're woken up and they think that they're on their way back home, but then Captain Dallas, played by Tom Skerritt, goes to talk to the mother of the computer, and she informs him that the reason that they're awake is that they need to investigate this signal. And apparently it's part of the company's rule book. They're never mentioned as Weyland-Yutani in this movie.
No.
Although you do see some logos here and there in the background, but it's Weyland without the D, Weyland-Yutani in the original Alien. So you assume that is the company. That's the name of the company that they keep referring to. So it's somewhere in the rule book that if they pick up a signal of intelligent life, that they have to go investigate it. And that is what they do. The Nostromo detaches itself from the refinery city in space, and all 7 crew members descend upon this planet, which is called LV-426. Now, this is the same planet that you see beautifully illustrated, animated over the opening titles of the movie. Now, just the setup of the opening titles of this movie with that very eerie, understated Goldsmith score with the hieroglyphics slowly spelling out alien as the camera pans over LV-426 is just, it brings me to my happy place. Like, your happy place is in the theater. Mine is watching the beginning of this movie,
just the opening,
hearing that score. And
it's a slow burn.
It is a slow burn, and a lot of stuff is made over this in the bonus materials. Like, nothing happens in the first 45 minutes. Yeah,
well, I was actually, because I was watching it for the show again. I took some notes, and like Kane and Lambert and Dawson. Now I watched the 2003 extended cut for this, so I don't know if the timing is slightly different, but Kane and Lambert and Dallas don't actually go into the derelict ship until 28 minutes into the movie. So I mean, you think about that. The pacing is so deliberate because he's setting you up for like this crazy last hour.
Yeah.
Like up until that point, nothing's really happened except the crew arguing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you had mentioned before, Christina, that your son, he had recently watched it, and he's 13. Now, was he like put off by that? Because these kids nowadays, everything is like video game bang in your face. Now if this movie was remade, you'd see the creature in like the first 2 minutes.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean,
you'd get a jump scare. And
I think that because he's watched a lot of older movies
with us,
he's not like as put off by slower paced films. Yeah. So I think he's probably more receptive than your average. Yeah. I mean,
you look at the original Star Wars, nothing really happens there either. I mean, you get that upfront space battle, and then you watch R2 and 3PO yell at each other in the desert.
Right. I mean, I just think that maybe like I trained him up so that
he's got to step ready. Up over some of the other kids.
But putting yourself in the mindset of a viewer that's not seen this before, and hearing reviews, hearing that maybe there's a chest burster coming up, you're this is making you tense, all this arguing, first of all, and then even just walking across the planet because you don't know what's coming. Yeah. So everything
in this is very claustrophobic from them coming out of those cryo tubes. The ship itself, even though it's massive, you see it. They're in these tiny little quarters. They're all huddled over each other in the command room, even when they're inside those suits, which are beautifully designed. It just looks like a massive coffin that they're walking around in.
Right. And it's like another callback. They're kind of reminiscent of the 20,000 Leagues suits.
Yes, I think. Yeah. Even with the little steam coming out of the head, like air bubbles.
And like Mobius designed them. Jean-Gerard Mobius.
Oh, yes. Oh. Yeah. So if you're a comic book aficionado.
And
That's a
like Ridley
beautiful
Scott
work.
actually asked him to design them, and there's a lot of features on them that you don't see that well in the film because it's dark, but they actually have like kind of a samurai armor quality to, especially to like the shoulder
Yep.
You
pieces.
see that when
Yeah.
Ripley's putting it on at the end,
At
in
the
the
end,
in the
yeah.
closet.
In her underwear. Sorry.
She's always got to end up in her underwear. Always.
Listen, it's in contracts.
It's
It's in the contracts. I'm not arguing.
We're on. Yeah. Just say
Sorry.
Ripley in her underwear just throws me off completely.
I know, because all I think about is Dave's comment when we saw it the first time, which was, "She has no ass."
Yeah, that was their one contribution
That was his
to
takeaway.
they don't draw straws, but Kane is the most inquisitive. So he wants to go down. He volunteers to go down to the planet to investigate. And then
How'd that
Dallas,
work out for him?
and just because Lambert doesn't want to go, I think Dallas picks her just for some reason to spite her.
She's
You're
there.
reluctant. You're
Yeah.
reluctant. You're gonna go. I'm captain. I get to stay on board.
And she's got that great line, stop griping. I like griping. So they find the derelict ship, which is a beauty in itself.
Yeah.
Now, before we actually get there, when they descend from the refinery in the Nostromo down to the planet, that score is just one of the most indelible, one of the greatest pieces of movie music that I think I have ever heard. When the Nostromo, and you see, it's almost like a black hole kind of a readout on their monitors as you see all those grids.
Well, that's it. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the the state of they came out the same year, right?
Yeah.
So that was
but you see the Nostromo like slowly turning as it's matching the curve of the planet,
you
and
got
that Goldsmith, that
blocks,
lush music that comes up. That's a perfect moment in cinema for me. But they get down there, and it's a rough landing. So the planet is not conducive to spaceships landing on it. So they have to do some repairs after they land because some things have been damaged. So the three, Dallas, Kane, and Lambert, go out to investigate while Parker and Brett, the two mechanics, are fixing the ship. And Ash, the science officer, is keeping tabs on the expedition via radio. So we get to the ship, and the derelict ship, which is a Giger design. I believe Giger designed that. He did all the alien stuff, even that ship.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when those openings that Jeff mentioned before. That's a telltale Giger sign.
Let's go right through there. Okay.
Yeah.
He didn't just design it though. He actually did the model work on Space Jockey. So
yes.
He actually worked on it.
What an impressive.
Which is a set piece. Unlike as a kid when you see that, like that's where you're like, I want to know all about this. What is this?
Yeah.
I don't care that they just came from some spaceport or truck stop or whatever. But when you see that space jockey, which they don't refer to it in the movie as a space jockey, but we know. I mean, I think from the trading cards and from the novel and from the, this, and it's just like you said, it's just an absolutely gorgeous set piece. And it's just, you're just like, what am I looking at? Because it's massive. And it's so imposing, and it's so like, it just takes you. You're like, all right, we are not in a normal movie right here.
And then you see the little hint of what's to come, because there's the broken ribs.
Yep.
The broken ribs in his chest.
Yeah. Is he like part of the chair? Because
that's what Dallas says. That's what Dallas.
He looks like he's actually part of the chair. Like there's not a separation. But I guess if your corpse, if you die and you're just sitting in your Barca lounger long enough, you will become part of the furniture.
Yeah.
Right. You would just kind of like meld into it.
Yeah. And even before they reach the space jockey, as they're going through the corridor of this ship, the bones that are making up, lining the walls. So, and I think it's Veronica Cartwright that points this out in the bonus features. It's like when they're going into those openings, like they're entering the womb, they're entering the body of the ship, and they're seeing the inside, the skeletal frame.
Giger's stuff is very organic. Yeah, very, very cool. Unlike anything you'd ever seen.
You wonder, like, okay, you see the space jockey, and as Christina said, he's got and as the characters point out, it looks like something blew out from inside. And so now this again, I don't want to turn this into an Alien versus Prometheus discussion, but this goes in direct contrast to what they set up in Prometheus, that these are just spacesuits and that's not a skeleton that you're looking at.
But I don't like that at all.
Because as a kid, you're like, what did this creature look like when it was alive?
Yeah, because he's got that kind of like the elephant hose thing that you're like, is it a bone? Is it? Yeah, because it does look like a breathing apparatus. Like it may have been something around his mouth, but you don't know what kind of alien you look like.
And then the camera like lovingly does a close up on the face, and it's a skull. It's the eyes are hollowed out. It's not a suit. So anyway, so they spent some time around this, and it's funny because some of the suits at 20th Century Fox, this was a very expensive set to build, the space jockey set. And they were opposed to it, that you're only going to be in here for like 2 minutes of film. And this is the most expensive set in the entire movie. But Ridley got his way in the end.
He took a page out of Kira Kurosawa. He's like, I'm going to build this thing
like,
and then show it to you for a minute.
Right.
Now, did they film this in Pine, was it Pinewood?
Shepperton.
Yeah, okay.
And they said that that set alone cost like $500,000, like just that set. And it's like a $10 million budget. So like that's a
good portion.
That's a huge chunk of change.
But the argument was that once people see this is a movie that is elevated among other science fiction movies. Like you can tell that these actors are in that space with that.
Well, I was going to say, there's other ways that they could have, made this come to fruition with miniatures or whatever, and backdrop screens or matte paintings and whatnot. But that's not what he chose to do, and you can tell.
Yeah.
But it's not the actors in that scene. You know this, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's Ridley Scott's 2 kids. And I think it was the son of the art director, a cinematographer or something. Like they just took, somebody's kids from the set and like stuck them in because of the scale.
Yep.
So it would make it look bigger.
Yeah.
And 2 of the kids fainted, right? Because they didn't have enough air in the suit.
They were Ridley's kids. Yeah.
All for the art, kids.
Yeah, it's like, oh, they're all right. Come on. As he's chomping on
Suck it up. I have no budget left for medical.
So there is a hole in the floor in this set right next to the space jockey. Of course, Kane finds it first, and he wants to go down. So they can't see the bottom when they shine their flashlights down. So they've got like a tripod, and they have a line attached to him, and they drop him down in this hole. There is a deleted scene where they actually set up the tripod. Dallas tells him, do not detach yourself from this line. We're going to talk to you at all times.
And the first thing he does.
And he goes down into the hole.
Right, he breaks horror movie number 1, which is never separate. Never separate. When you separate, something bad happens. Always.
Because if all 3 of them went down, they would have all had face huggers, and they never would have made it back to the Nostromo, right?
The movie would have been over right there.
Yeah. So Kane goes down, and here we have a storehold of eggs. And now this is unique to Alien. I don't think that they've ever done this in any of the other Alien movies, but there is that mist over the eggs.
Yeah.
That when Kane breaks it, because he says that it reacts when he goes through it, that must be a telltale sign for the eggs.
Right, they're probably
like a spider web that somebody is here. And
they're like in stasis. They're just waiting.
So again, we're talking about, what does the space jockey mean? Where was this shipped from? Are these eggs, as they later do tell you in Prometheus, are they weapons? Did this happen by accident? Does the space jockey and the aliens, do they coexist? Or did they pick it up just like the Nostromo picked it up from somewhere?
Right. I would have loved it if they were just all like in egg cartons. And then they were just going to the store.
Which is what the poster was an egg, just a regular egg.
Yeah, just an egg, the cracked egg. Yeah, but that tagline, "In space, no one can hear you scream," is enough to be like, I don't want to go to space. I don't want to go to space at all. Star Wars lied to me.
Yeah. So Kane falls. Of course, he falls down into the pit with these eggs, and then some movement catches his eye. Now, when the camera does the close-up, and a great story, and I'm sure both of you saw this on the bonus features, that Ridley Scott wanted specific movement to be happening inside this translucent egg. So it's his hands in washing up gloves, as he calls them.
Washing up gloves.
Doing a little blah, 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 blah. So it's his hand like playing the facehugger inside.
You got to do it like this. You got to do it like this.
I mean, I don't know though. If I was Kane, like to me, like once you see viscous liquid, like you better turn around or you're going to end up in a chrysalis. Like get the F out.
I mean, like, dude, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Let me check this out.
And that's one of the first scenes in the movie that's like really visceral. Like from here on out, I feel like you're so conscious of like things that are wet. like the creature, the astronauts, like, sweating on the
Sweating,
ship.
Yeah. And
The
there's
water
oil
falling.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Well,
there's just, like,
especially in that scene where it looks like it's raining inside.
yeah.
And you're like, this can't be good. This can't be good.
It's just it's like once the alien appears initially, like all of a sudden there's goop,
Goop.
Yeah.
everywhere.
I know where you've been.
So then we have Kane looking down upon this closed egg, and it opens, and that noise, that sound effect is just wonderful. That
Squishy.
Yeah, and he
This
looks
is-
down into what is actually a cow or sheep stomach or something that's just there
That was
with
a lamb,
Nottingham lace
yeah.
is what Ridley Scott calls it, stomach lining. And then with a mixture of backwards photography and quick cuts, your first big shock of the movie is when the facehugger erupts and attaches itself to Kane. And again, only like a 2-second, a very quick thing, blink and you miss it. But
Yeah.
it's, enough one of those scenes that everybody jumps and then probably has a good laugh at themselves in the theater.
It is.
They
It
jump,
is the first
right?
jump scare of this movie. Yeah,
Yeah,
and a very
usually-
effective one.
and you can tell, like they give the audience time to breathe after these jump scares because they don't want to give any dialogue because they realize everybody's screaming in the theater. So what did they show right after the jump scare is the derelict and the camera slowly moving back. And I think that's to let the audience process
Just kind of
the
process
scare
it.
that just happened, right?
Yeah. You used to bring up the white screen that sometimes would show up after an intense moment.
After a
Kinda
sad
like-
moment and the
Yeah,
white
that's-
screen to
yeah,
get you
just to kind of
tear
get
up.
you.
Yeah, I hate that. I really do hate that.
Manipulating bastards.
But they don't do that here. So they bring back Kane to the Nostromo. Now, that's what I also would have liked to have been in on that, a fly in the wall. How they got him out of there,
Right.
what their reaction was, and how they got him out of the ship, first of all, to get him back to the Nostromo.
Yeah, because you think the first thing they would have tried to do is get the thing removed from his face before they even
Right.
like, let's bring this back into the ship with it attached to him.
But then again, if they did, then he would have been, the helmet was destroyed. So he wouldn't have been able to breathe if they
That is
took it off of
true.
him. Yeah.
All right, fine.
But
You got me with logic.
they get back. Ripley does not want to let him in. The same reason that they went down to investigate this, because of the company rules, there is also a company rule
Yeah.
that there's a quarantine procedure that they have to adhere to. Dallas is yelling at her from the outside. Lambert's yelling at her from the outside to let him in, and she's sticking to her gun. She's not going to let him in. What has to happen is they have to stay outside the ship for 24 hours. Now, time is a little bit weird in this movie. I'm not really sure how much time goes by from this point to the end of the movie, but I'm not sure if 24 hours would have been long enough for the incubation period to be over, but regardless, it doesn't matter because Ash goes and overrides Ripley and lets them in.
And he's always undermining.
Yes, he is.
All throughout the movie. And whenever she speaks to him, it doesn't matter what it's about, he's always condescending to her.
Yeah, because he recognizes that she is his main opposition. I think he's got everybody else's ear. Dallas just does whatever he tells him because he's the science officer and he should know, he knows his stuff.
Right. And let's talk about Ripley a little bit because she is kind of like this character that is unassuming and you don't really think, like, because it's all mostly male dominated and you're like, all right, up until this point, all your male action heroes have been, well, male, I guess. But so she's really, I don't think that she was intended to be a woman.
She wasn't.
Right.
Yeah. So,
I think-
it was written as like 7 parts, and there's a note on the script that said it could be men or women.
Right. And I think he
And-
basically just hired the best person for the job, regardless
But they
of gender.
still didn't expect, like Ron Shusett says in one of the documentaries, they still didn't think that Ripley would be a woman. They
Would be
thought,
picked, yeah.
right, that some of the other
Some of the
characters
other
might
ones,
end
right.
up be women, but not the the lead character. And it's not apparent that she's the heroine.
No,
Because
not
the
at
first
all.
act-
That's what I'm saying. She's
because-
very
yeah.
unassuming and is, up until this point, she's kind of taking a back seat to all these other guys
Yeah,
going
she's
out.
she's definitely not getting the most screen time early on.
No,
It's
not
really
at all.
Everybody else.
an ensemble, like up to that
Yes,
point, like
yeah.
where you're seeing all the different characters doing their different things. Parker and Brett and Ash, and obviously because Dallas, Kane, and Lambert are the ones who leave the ship.
Right.
You think
Yeah.
that one of them is going to be the hero. So it's
Yeah.
really not apparent.
No,
up
and I think that's
until
what's great about it.
later that it's going to
Yep.
be her.
Because she's kind of, she's forced because everyone else gets taken out.
At this point, Kane is back on the ship. They cut him out of his suit and he's got what we know now as the facehugger on his face, which is a beautiful effect when they first take it off and the tail winds its way around his throat,
Mm-hmm.
and you just hear that almost that predator type sound that it makes. That can you do it, Jeff? I know you do it so well. There you go. That's what I was
Force
waiting
me
for.
to do it.
But that's the noise. That's kind of the noise. And that's, the tail wraps around. So you know that this thing is not going to come off without a fight. Ash doesn't really want to get this thing off. You know that after the fact. You go back and watch this again, and you're looking at Ian Holm for all the little things that he does, where that weird little jogging fit that he has right when the three leave the ship. You're thinking, oh, he's just warming himself up. No, that's some crazy robot dish that he
does. he's just getting that milk flowing.
And is that really milk, or is that some kind of I
don't know. But but again, that's like something we've never seen.
It is
like
milk.
Oh,
no, because one of the special features I watched, Ridley Scott said Ian Holm hated milk. And he kept pouring it into his mouth in the scene when he's on the
Ridley
table.
Scott is really a sadistic bastard. He's putting his children at risk. And then he's drowning his poor guy. He's probably lactose intolerant.
So in this future, like milk runs robots. We could have like cars that run on milk.
Nice. I like it. Milk and eggs. You got the alien eggs and milk. You pick up a loaf of bread, you're good to go.
It is a great visual. Later on, when you see all that glazed milk all over his face.
When he's spinning around that room. Oof.
Yeah. It's like he's a walking advertisement for Dunkin' Donuts.
Get your creamer, kids.
I don't really think of Dunkin' Donuts when I see
it's the Ash donut, right? Oh. Ash doesn't really want to get this thing off of Kane, right? Because it's his job. But then again, Ash probably doesn't really know what he's to be looking for.
Right.
Because the company has sent them out to investigate this signal. They perhaps know that there's some kind of a creature that they're going to be able to bring back. They couldn't know about the facehugger, the different phases of this alien. So as far as Ash knows, maybe the facehugger is it. Maybe this is what they need to get. So
regardless of its form, it's an alien.
Yeah. So he half-heartedly, like Dallas says, we need to take this off of him, and Ash tries to plant some doubt, saying, well, it'll kill him if we take it off. It's feeding him oxygen. And then Dallas, I'll take that responsibility. So
screw that.
So I think he tries in the least intrusive way to cut one of the fingers, and then surprise to everybody, boom, it bleeds acid and almost eats through the hull.
That's a beautiful scene too, where they're going from floor to floor, watching it as it.
Yeah. The big unanswered question is like, okay, so that came out. Wouldn't the thing still be bleeding after they cut it, like your own finger would be?
Right.
But there's a deleted scene a little bit later on. It's the same scene where the whole crew is inside the room with Kane with the thing on his face. They're looking at his X-ray, and Ripley says, "What's that on his lung?" Because she sees a shadow on his lung, and Ash just says, that's all it is, a shadow."
He dismisses her the way he does every time she speaks. Every single time, he just sort of condescendingly just like writes her off, and so because he does that, so the rest of the crew don't take her concerns seriously.
Right.
But again, she's the only one that's raising these concerns. So he is targeting
shutting her
specifically. Down. And so it's also that same scene where Ash he's got this throwaway line that it's already healed. The wound I just made has already healed itself. So that kind of explains why there's no more accident.
Cauterized.
So there's a little, it gets a little bit slow again. There's a confrontation between Ripley and Ash as he's looking in the microscope, and she kind of sneaks up on him and takes him to task for letting them in. And again, he dismisses her. He's like, she tries to look in his microscope. He's like, don't do that. Don't do that.
Right. And he acts so... I mean, the first time you see it, you don't know that he's a robot. But he does not act like the way a normal functioning human does.
No.
Like he acts so twitchy around her, like he doesn't even want her near him physically. He like his shoulders hunch up and he sort of like moves away when she gets close.
Yeah, but you're right. It's not obvious on the first go around. What's really going on here?
You just think he's a
correct,
jerk.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, this guy's got like hyperspace sickness or something.
Yeah. Oh, he's going to die egregiously by the end of this movie is what you're thinking when you first see it. But
I think too, because it was originally written, she could have been a male character, but because she's a woman, every like interaction that they have is so much more charged. I think.
Yeah.
you know, because
and it plays when they have their final confrontation.
Yeah.
All those interactions completely
Come
play.
back, yeah. Oh, we're
Where
leading
are
into
we?
dinner. We're leading back into
We're
dinner.
leading into dinner, yeah, because
Yeah.
Into dinner.
So there's like, again, I took note of the time. So like at 35 minutes, Kane is attacked. And the big thing that we're about to talk about happens at 57 minutes. So there's
That's an
long
hour in.
There's a long stretch, like 22 odd minutes between the facehugger and then the sort of the big shock.
Now, nobody suspects, you know, of course, with the exception of Ash, that anything is wrong with Kane at this point. Maybe they're in denial. They don't want to think anything's wrong with him. They just want to leave this planet and go back home and go back into hypersleep.
I just want to get paid.
All the clues have already been laid. You know, the ship that
no
they found
pun
this
intended.
thing has an explosion out of the space jockey. Dallas has commented on this already.
Right.
You know,
I
everybody's
didn't think it
wondering out
happened
loud.
to you.
Now, it's got something down his throat. It's keeping him alive. What can it be doing? And so the audience knows, but the characters do not, that something is afoot with Kane. So we get to the dinner scene. And now, apparently, the food is destroyed, except for those two damn birds that are going back and forth. They survive the chestburster scene.
Nice. My grandparents had one of those little birds.
I think mine did too.
Right.
Very 70s thing.
I
don't think they
very much a 70s thing.
Once you left the 70s into the 80s, there was a memorandum that those had to be destroyed.
I want one. I want one now.
But yeah, we get to the dinner scene, and I think that this scene was built up even before the movie came out. Audiences knew that this was coming just from word of mouth and what have you. So it's funny to hear in the bonus features that a lot of audience members seemingly were leaving the theater during scenes like this, and especially the chestburster, but what they were actually doing was walking to the back so they wouldn't be as close to the screen, because somehow the distance was keeping them safer.
And that was the scene when we were watching this with our son. My husband and I are like covertly trying to watch him, to see how he's going to respond without cueing him that something is going to happen, you know, because he had no idea. He had absolutely no idea, and it was so rewarding.
That's awesome. To go into this movie not knowing about that scene.
Because he launched about 5 feet out of his chair.
And then you're like, ah!
Now, every single time I watch this chestburster scene, and the alien is out, and it's coiled there, and it's looking at everybody. Well, it doesn't really have eyes, but it's like, you know, its head is moving around. I swear I see a silver cable.
Yes.
That's moving its tail.
Yes, I agree with you.
Okay.
Is that not true? Or is it?
Well, I was looking online to see if that was like a famous gaffe that, you know, they just left in, but I couldn't find a thing about it. But I see it.
No, I agree with you. Yep, I agree.
Doesn't take it away. I was
gonna say, at this point you're looking for stuff because you've seen it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
See, one thing I really like about this scene, though, is the first time we hear like this audio cue that's used later in the film, like multiple times, to signal that the alien is coming. And I don't know if you guys hear it, but it's the heartbeat noise. So there's
Jaws.
There's like all of a sudden you start to hear like a heartbeat like pounding faster and faster, like right before. It's very subtle. Okay. And then it's actually later on when Brett is alone and he's looking for Jones. Yeah. You hear it again. You hear that. Yeah, it's really subtle. Caught it. I think this time around was the first time I really caught it in the scene when the chestburster comes out, and then I heard it again later in the film.
Because this is one of those movies that keeps giving. Like I probably see something that I never really paid attention to for the first time.
Yeah, well, I mean, those sets are so gorgeous. I mean, they're so well realized, and you kind of get caught up in the story. And after a couple viewings, you start to look around. You start to pick up on little things. Yeah,
and again, Ash asserts himself. Parker grabs a fork to impale the alien as it's on the table, and he stops him. It's like, don't touch it. And everybody's just in such shock that, you know, he doesn't touch it. And then
I mean, we already know that by cutting the thing that attacked him, you know, it was going to bleed acid. So you're kind of like, all right, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. If I stab it, who the hell knows what would have happened?
And then Ash gives Kane that very insidious look. You know, what's happening? When is this going to happen? As he's eating before the pain starts. So he knows.
He's always the only person who's not talking to anybody at the table.
Yeah.
Like whenever there's conversation at the table, Ash is not talking to anybody. He's just sitting.
Yeah. Ash knows damn well what that shadow on Kane's lung was. So he's waiting for it to manifest itself during this dinner scene. So the alien scurries away. There's a burial at space that they attend to, and they clean up that kitchen pretty well, because when they're in there later, I don't see any blood stains on the wall. And let me just say that the upholstered walls, the Nostromo, are so inviting to me. I just want to lie my back against one of those and take a nap. Yeah.
I'm home.
So they eject Kane's body out into space, have a little funeral, and then they set up tracking devices. Ash does, and Brett and Parker work up some cattle prods. The idea is to trap this thing and shoot it out into space through one of the airlocks.
And again, in this scene, Ripley asks, what do the trackers cue off of? And he's like, just kind of like gives her this really condescending response.
Really?
Like, do you need to know this? Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's so noticeable. Like, once you cue onto it, that like every time she speaks, he's just like dismissing her.
And nobody else questions him. Nobody else even pays attention to it. It's just between him and her, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So now this raises another big question. The growth spurt of this alien, like how much time actually goes by between the birth and shedding its skin and becoming an adult alien? Because that's something I would have loved to see, like the pains of growth of this thing. If it grows that fast, like, is it an hour? Is it 2 hours that goes by? Is it 3 hours? Who knows how long?
I mean, to me, it seems like it's a few hours, but I don't know if that's just like my perception.
Yeah.
Of because they can't possibly have let it like run around the ship for like a week, right?
Right.
Yeah, we'll get it later.
Yeah.
Jonesy, go find that thing.
Yeah, because again, another deleted scene is right after the birth happens, and they've cleaned the kitchen, and they're sitting there again, and they've already jettisoned Kane, and they talk about finding it. And Parker says, "I'm not going into hypersleep with that thing on the ship.
Right.
We'd be sitting ducks if it found us." And actually, Brett says that. So one of the few things that he actually says in the movie. But this leads into the very long, suspenseful, first with Brett, Parker, and Ripley that find Jonesy. And there's that long scene where Jonesy's in the locker, and they're sneaking up on the locker, and then it's a scare anyway.
It is, yeah.
The cat hisses and then runs.
Jonesy.
Just like we said before, when you break off from the group, that's not good news, because they send Brett by himself off to look for the cat. And he's like, "You want me to go look for it?" And Go look for it. Yeah. We're going to pick it up again.
And then you hear that audio cue. Brett goes off by himself. There's no music. And you start to hear the heartbeat noise.
Yes. Now that you say that, I'm thinking of this scene. Yes, right? I do know that. Yeah, I can hear it.
And so that, to me, it becomes like an indicator that the alien is coming. Right. Because he never uses it as a cheat. It's always like right before the alien appears. And so you don't hear the music again until Brett actually gets taken, like right before he gets taken, when the alien actually shows up. Like you hear the heartbeat, you hear the sound of the rain falling, you hear the rattling chains.
Yeah, that's a pretty harrowing scene.
Yeah. And you know that something's gonna happen because he's so relaxed and vulnerable. He takes his hat off. Yep. He's like washing his face. He's not really taking it seriously, and then this thing appears.
It's almost like gives you a false sense of relaxation. The sound of the rain on the brim of his hat is just such an identifiable sound, I would assume that he's like in the cooling area. Like this is air conditioning runoff.
Something. I mean, because you don't really get a sense of how big the Nostromo is, but that room itself looks like it's pretty epic. Because like if you go to NASA down in the Kennedy Center, it actually has its own weather system inside the building because it's so tall. Right. So I always got the impression that, atmospheric and moisture or whatever that they're pumping in there to keep these guys alive is probably just building up and causing condensation.
And if you look around that room, you're seeing like buggies and vehicles.
So it's probably like a bay or some kind of
that they would have used on whatever planet they were on to get this mineral ore that they're tugging along. Now it's interesting how this scene differs in each of the two versions, the 2003 version and the original version, where the alien comes down in both of them and takes Brett. You see the first close up of the teeth.
Yep.
Of the lips moving back from the
And like
teeth,
you said,
and
and
then you get that great whiplash sound of the teeth coming out, and then you just see broken bones and blood and Brett being pulled up the upper regions of these chains, because the alien is kind of swinging itself amongst the chains.
Change.
And now in the original version, that's the end. That's the end of the scene. And the next thing you see is Dallas or Parker and Ripley briefing everybody else on what happened to Brett. And you're thinking, well, how do they know? They weren't there. But in this 2003 director's cut, they run into the set like as Brett's being pulled up, and they look up and his blood is running down on top of them. So they see the alien going back into the cooling ducts, and that's how Parker knows that it's, like a man, and all these other things that he tells the rest of the crew. So now this is serious. They could have possibly dealt with this tiny little thing running around the ship, but now this is a whole other ball game. They have to get this off the ship. They have to go back into hypersleep because they don't have enough oxygen and supplies to be awake for 10 months, and they won't survive the trip with this alien on board. So they know that it's going through the air ducts to get around. Ripley says that she'll do it. She volunteers, and then Dallas says no. He steps up as captain. He says, I'm going to do it. So the plan is he's got one of these flamethrowers, and he's going to force it out using the flamethrower into one of the air ducts and then blow it out into space. And as soon as you see him inside there, that's not going to happen. He can barely move himself in that thing.
He looks so awkward. Like he has one leg forward, like his knee is bent and he has like his foot down, and then the other one is like bent underneath him and sort of dragging. He's so awkward. You just think if he encountered this thing, he would never be able to maneuver himself to, even with the flamethrower in his hand.
Right.
Hold on. Let me bring my leg around. Hold on.
Yeah. And as he's going through the air duct, Lambert and Ripley, they're closing the entrances behind him, and that's a great grating mechanical sound when those things that the circle becomes smaller and smaller.
The aperture.
And I think this may be the most suspenseful scene in the movie is Dallas getting it, because the music just builds and builds and builds, and you have that great construct of looking at what Lambert's looking at on her readout.
Oh, yeah.
You can see the alien's dot. You can see Dallas's dot, the alien moving very quickly towards him. And yet then you go to Dallas and you know that something's coming towards him, but he can't see it and you can't see it.
Yeah. But you also, at this point, you're still thinking he's the captain of the ship. So he's our hero.
Yeah.
It's
like, this guy can't die. He's going to make it out of here. Yeah. Yep. I think he's got top billing on the poster.
He does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tom Skerritt is the first listed. And it's such a tense scene too, because Lambert is getting increasingly hysterical.
She's absolutely. Her character is losing her freaking mind.
And like she's like, get out of there. She's screaming. So like she's standing in for you.
She's the audience who's sitting in the theater going, get out of there, you idiots.
And the audience is probably crying right along with her, like, yes, get out of there, get out of there. And again, it's just a throwaway, maybe even a 1 second scene of what you see of the alien here. And again, I can understand
his arms out like that.
And I can understand asking my father, what did the alien look like? And just looking, this 1 second thing, like you don't know what you're looking at. Like you see hands and you see teeth. And that's all you see, really, because it's so scrunched up. You don't really see what.
Meanwhile, he's just like, "Come here, Dallas. Get over here."
That high-pitched feedback sound that you get as well that helps that scare along. So next scene immediately is Parker slamming the flamethrower down on the table, and that's what he's found. He's actually gone in himself to the tunnels to see if he could find Dallas, and all he sees is this flamethrower. No blood, no Dallas is what he says. So now everybody, the remaining 4 members here are all convinced that they're all going to die at this point. Now Dallas is gone.
Rightfully
they have no leadership. They have no leadership.
Rightfully so.
In one of again, bringing up the bonus features, Yaphet Kotto plays Parker.
Yep.
And he really antagonized Sigourney Weaver in this scene to get her to step up and yell at him, because he was yelling at her as if he was Yaphet Kotto to get a performance out of her. Like, what are you going to do? You're not the captain. You're not the captain of me. You can't tell me what to do. And he's berating her until she finally, and you can see it in the film. It's probably her strongest moment in the movie when she yells at Parker and tells him to shut up.
But that's what needed to happen for her character to
step up and become the captain of the ship. Yeah, and she is. She takes control in that scene. Tells everybody what to do. And but again, Ash.
I was going to say Ash. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like Lambert's emotionally sort of like she's just hysterical at this point.
Yeah, no, there's no
she's
way.
She's breaking down, she's crying, like she can't make any decision.
No, right.
And Parker's emotional in a different way. You know, he's like, I just want to go and destroy this thing. You know,
he's frustrated because his physicality cannot solve the situation.
Yeah.
Right. And so nobody is like trying to think clearly. She's sitting there trying to think the situation through. Yeah. And, you know, she asks Ash, like, if there's any contributions from the science department, and she asks it of him in such a, it's almost like snotty, like, do you have anything to contribute?
Do you want to step up here and give us some suggestions?
It's so nice at that point to see her push back on him with sort of the same attitude that he's given her.
Right. But that's the build-up. That's the evolution of the character. And that's why, because at the beginning, she's so unassuming. And then all of a sudden, she's like she's your strength. And you're like, all right.
The audience, now that Dallas is gone, they're looking to her for to lead them through this movie.
Well, you're definitely not going to go to the ash hole. So.
And again, there is a deleted scene right here that happens after they disperse from the kitchen scene, where and it's in the Alan Dean Foster novelization as a fully realized scene, where Parker sees the alien by one of the airlocks. They didn't film the actual part with the alien and what Parker is seeing, but they filmed his voice coming over, whispering, Ripley, Lambert, can anybody hear me? And then they're both there and they pick up and they're like, what? It's by one of the airlocks. You know, hit the button now and you can get it. And they try to do it, but Ash spooks it. He hits an alarm on the airlock and it runs away. And they don't know that at that point. They don't know that but Ash is listening as well. And he hits the alarm and it runs away from the airlock. But for time or for budget or whatever, they just never filmed that scene.
But that's also, you know, I actually like the fact that they didn't include that, because the reveal, you know, when we do find out that Ash is being Machiavellian and, you know, working against the entire crew this whole time, I think it's better. Like, you would have realized that right then and there.
I don't think you knew at that point. The alarm comes on, but you don't know that it was Ash that said
gotcha.
it. Yeah.
I thought you were implying.
And then it runs away once the alarm comes on. But a little bit later.
There's also the deleted scene where they come across Dallas.
But that's later.
That
is later. Because that was in one of those magazines I had. There is a scene shot that.
But before we get there, we have to talk about Ash, because we get his big reveal scene. She sends Lambert and Parker to go get oxygen for the shuttle. Ash goes off to do whatever, and
meanwhile they're running a flamethrower and smoking in this thing the whole time.
But Ripley has access to Mother, and Mother gives up the goods automatically. Like, there's no security protocol whatsoever here.
Right.
Mother tells her that
if only I'd asked you at the beginning of the movie.
And what was it called? Secret Order 537.
And she says like override it.
Yes.
You know, right? And it says first priority, bring back the alien, crew expendable. That's the thing that like punches you in the gut. Crew expendable.
It also says science officer eyes only.
Yeah. And then Ash comes and leans over her shoulder and says, there's a perfectly good explanation for this.
Let me take you over some drinks and I'll explain it all.
Yeah. And again, if only he had some Tic Tacs in his pocket, she would have heard him sidling up.
Yeah, didn't see that coming.
Some milk flavored Tic Tacs in his pocket. And this is a very disturbing scene, because she is going to tell Lambert and Parker what she's heard, and Ash is trying to stop her. So he's hitting all the doors. He's closing the doors so she can't escape. Then he becomes violent. He rips out her hair trying to grab her.
This is rough.
Throws her around the room while his face is ticking and his eyes are twitching, and you see he's drunk so much milk that he's sweating it now out of his forehead. And this is the part where I tweeted a cover last night of a magazine called Fantastic Films. And this was the January 1980 issue of Fantastic Films. Now, this is a good 6 months after Alien has been out, but they were still talking about it because it was such a huge deal. This article was all about the sexual connotations of the movie, like from beginning to end. And it was very heady stuff for a kid's magazine, right?
Yeah.
But I read this article over and over again. And the big thing that it brought up was this scene with Ash and Ripley. He has her down on the desk. All around him are pinups from skin magazines. So there's naked women everywhere. He takes one of these Playboys or whatever it is, rolls it up and shoves it into her mouth to choke her. Now, it's sexual violence because he doesn't strangle her with his hands,
Right.
which he could obviously do because he's got the strength of a robot, but he wants to humiliate her. He hates her from the get-go.
Yeah.
So he is violating her in the only way that he can, because obviously he has no sexual organs. So it's his way of a rape, and it is very disturbing.
Yes, and it's very, like, his face is so impassive when he's doing this, and that makes it even worse, because she wakes up, she's unconscious when he starts doing this. She wakes up, she's struggling, you see her hands reaching up, trying to, like, grab at him, to push him off, and she can't do anything. She's, like, so helpless, and he's just sort of impassively assaulting her. And there's no way around it. And the only way it works is if you lay in all that groundwork earlier in the movie. He's, like I said, he's just been condescending to her. He's been contemptuous of her. He's undermined her throughout the film. And it obviously, like, does not work at all if it's a male character.
And it's a violent act, and it's him asserting his authority over her.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's finally coming to the fore and showing her who's boss by doing this. It doesn't last long. Parker and Lambert burst in, and then he gives some kind of death grip to Parker's shoulder. And then you realize, okay, there's something off about this guy. He is not
there's no
what
way,
he
right?
seems.
Parker's like so.
And then Parker grabs a fire extinguisher, I think, or some kind of oxygen tube. Yeah. Knocks his head clean off, and the body's still fighting with Parker as its head is kind of is disconnected. Then we realize that Ash is a robot, as Parker says. Now, as we know from Aliens, and we know from Prometheus with the David character, that these things exist in this reality. So it's not like that, what is this thing? It's they know robots exist in this reality, but they did not know that there was one among them.
On their ship.
Yeah. They hook back his head, and it's kind of a funny, it's the one part where the special effects don't really jive, where
because you know how they're doing it.
Well, you got the fake head of Ian Holm, and then in the next scene, the real head of Ian Holm, and they do not really look exactly alike. You can tell the fake head from the real head, right? But it's a great scene because they modulate his voice.
Yes.
So it's like it's like talking through a computer, and the milk is bubbling out of his mouth as he wakes back up, and that's when he's got all the glaze all over his face, and he tells them that he's been protecting the alien for the entire time. So you don't know, has he been having conversations with it? Does he sit down with it? Does he know where it's hiding out? And so you don't really know what their relationship is.
Hang out, I'll get you the cat.
But he does tell them that they can't kill it, or at least, whatever means they have, they won't be able to kill it, because he probably, and that's the other thing, is that as a viewer, is this an animal? As they mention, all animals are afraid of fire, or is this, as intelligent as they are? You don't really know what its perspective is.
And he has, like, I think probably the best line in the movie, at the end of the scene, where he says, "I can't lie to you about your chances, but you have my sympathies."
Which is like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Right, and Parker is clearly so pissed at this point. He sets the flamethrower on it, which is totally unnecessary because they're going to burn the ship.
Right.
They're gonna blow everything
But he's
up.
like, he's offended that this robot got the better of him, Now, if we thought that this whole Ash Ripley scene was disturbing, we get into whole new levels with this next scene where the alien gets Parker and Lambert. And Ripley hears this happen over the intercom, this entire thing, which gives us
which is even scarier. As opposed to actually seeing it.
You don't see it.
Yeah,
you see the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was gonna say you see her. Go ahead.
You see it attack Parker. She sees it coming. She starts kind of backing. Lambert starts backing up
because you see its shadow.
You see the shadow,
correct. And you do see the tail.
Yeah, and then it starts attacking Parker, and Parker goes down the way you'd expect Parker to go down, right?
Because he wants to shoot it when he's got the flamethrower, but it's right in front of Lambert, so he can't hit it without hitting Lambert with the flames. So he's telling her to move, and she's too scared to move. So he has no choice but to rush it with the blunt end of the flamethrower, and that doesn't go well for him. Because
and then you just hear her screaming, like sort of the echo throughout the ship. But again, like the heartbeat audio cue is used in this scene. First it's used, you hear it very slightly when Ripley is looking for Jones. So the alien is around. Because she hears Jones, she hears his little meow, and she's like, Jones, I can't leave the cat, and then she runs back to get him. But then the cue starts to get louder for Parker and Lambert, like that heartbeat noise. Yeah. And that they're going to bite it because you
as
hear
they're
that.
Desperately trying to pull these oxygen tanks out of the, and dropping them and making all this noise. The last thing you see happen is the alien's tail coming up between her legs.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then cut back to Ripley, who's hearing all this, and you're hearing this this frenzied breathing on the part of Lambert, as if she's being violated by the alien. And how is just the stuff of nightmares, because again, it's much worse what is in your head than what they could have possibly shown you in this. Your suspicions are confirmed when Ripley finds them, and when she sees what's there, like you see her reaction, like she shudders and and you see Lambert's feet and her naked legs that are swinging there. So she's not wearing clothes. So what the alien did to her is unknown, and I would not like to venture what he did to her. So the alien definitely knows that there's a difference between the men and the women on this ship as to what he did to Lambert and how it reacts to Ripley on the shuttle later, as if he's trying to unfurl himself in front of Ripley as he's coming out of the wall, but we haven't got there yet.
So that's interesting, though. So because in subsequent movies, and I think it was in 3, they established the fact that these xenomorphs take on the form of whatever they gestate in. So because up to this point, we just assumed that was their natural form. But in 3, it comes out of a dog and then has dog-like features.
Yeah.
So if this came out of a man, Cain, would it have, what you're implying is that it has
human
manly urges. It has human manly urges.
And Ash calls it Cain's son at one point. That may be in the bonus features. That may be in the deleted scenes or in the
because that is pretty nose on then.
So at this point, Ripley is by herself, and she's got Jones in the cat box. And she makes her way to the shuttle, and the alien is in the corridor between her and the shuttle. And it is a great scene.
This is intense because now you got the lights are going off. And,
now, if you got epilepsy, do not watch this movie, or at least this scene, because this is going to set you off. Because
the cuts in this are just rapid.
Yeah.
I mean, it is so up close, rapid. I mean, that's now you're ramping it up. Like you said, you had almost a full hour of just a slow burn. And then this last 20 minutes is just straight up nothing but now, you're catching your breath.
Before this scene, she's already set the Nostromo to self-destruct.
Right, to self-destruct.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny. We talked about Lost in Space last week. There's a similar situation where one of the characters, they're having trouble with the Resolute spaceship, and they all have to get off of it. And the robots are on there. And one of the characters says, can't we blow the ship up? And one of them says, it doesn't have a self-destruct button. Who would blow up their own ship? Why would it have a self-destruct button? And I'm thinking that's right. Why?
Yeah, but every science fiction, Star Trek, I mean, every Enterprise has a self-destruct button. They're like, listen, we can't get out of this one. Let's just go out on a high note.
So she's got to do like 10 different steps in order to get this self-destruct thing going. And she's doing this, and you're on your wit's end because you don't know if the alien's right behind her, as she's going through all this stuff. So she does, and the ship is set to destruct, I think, in 10 minutes, and the shutoff deadline is in 5 minutes.
Right.
So that's when she backs up to go to the shuttle, and that's when, in the director's cut, she finds Dallas.
Okay. Gotcha.
So here's where this scene is. And I know, and everybody in the bonus features were understanding of, even Tom Skerritt was understanding of why this scene got cut, because it really cuts into the immediacy of her needing to leave this ship.
Right. It slows.
Right.
Yeah. It brings it to a screeching halt.
And why she would go down into this hull, have this conversation with him while she's got 5 minutes to get out of there just doesn't make sense, even though it is a very creepy scene, and it gives a great insight as to what the alien's motivation is, really. So she finds basically where the alien has set himself, his home,
a nest,
Nostromo. All of his secretions and his slime, he's made into various different shapes on the walls. She sees Brett on one side of this room and Dallas on the other. Dallas is still alive and is able to kind of barely talk to her. And he says over and over, kill me, kill me. Yeah. Brett is like encased in the beginnings of what looks like one of the eggs from the derelict ship. So this begs the question, in this movie, you know, before aliens came into the story, it looks like the aliens themselves are self-sustaining rather than depending on a queen to lay these eggs.
Right.
Because Brett is devolving into an egg form. And we can only assume that the egg is hosting a facehugger that will attach itself to Dallas, and then hence birthing a second alien on the ship. Right. And then there's also the theory that the alien is using Dallas for food, or maybe it could be doing both. Who knows? But that's what Dallas is stuck there. And this is the scene, Jeff. All of our famous monsters had the photo of this scene.
Yeah, I just looked up the issue I had. Yeah, it was Warren Publication. Jim.
And this scene is in the Alan Dean Foster novelization as well. And the knowledge that they actually filmed this blew my mind, and that I never got to see it. And then finally, you know, with the advent of DVD years later, it was finally included as a bonus scene. And then it was incorporated into the director's cut from 2003. But it's an effective scene, and it's a great makeup job, I think. And Tom Skerritt sells it when he's stuck to the wall. But I agree that it really slows down the ending of the movie.
It would have been great if they could have figured out a different place to put it in the film.
In the movie,
right, correct. Yeah. That's why I actually thought it was earlier on, because the pacing is completely off.
Like, say if she finds that before she sets the ship to explode.
Right.
And like
now
maybe
she knows that she has no other recourse.
Yeah.
I mean, or even earlier. I mean, I'm not exactly sure when, but like, I just think maybe there was a point where they could have tried to incorporate it in, but in the end, it doesn't add anything to the final story. I think that's the issue. The scene only makes sense in the context of aliens. You know, later when you see all of the, you know, the settlers who've been like, put into the walls
right, with an egg right in front of them. So so Lost, thankfully it was not lost to time. It eventually did make its way back into various cuts of the movie. So Ripley grants Dallas's wish and blasts both him and Brett. Now again, it begs the question, how much time has gone on? How did the alien have the time to cocoon Dallas and cocoon Brett,
and where are those secretions coming from?
Yeah. So now we have the race to the finish. Ripley, there's a great scene where Ripley, and I think it must be the cut right after she finds Dallas and blasts him. She climbs up the ladder, and you see her fingers like over the rim of the ladder. Sigourney Weaver has very long fingers, and it's very similar to a scene a little bit later when the alien's hand is coming out of the shuttle when he's in the pipe work. It looks very similar to Ripley's, that shot of Ripley's hand of her fingers. She can't get to the shuttle because the alien is there. She goes back to try to shut off the self-destruct, and she doesn't have time. She doesn't make it back there in time. So now she has no choice but to go to the shuttle, or she's going to blow up with the ship. She doesn't see the alien there anymore. She gets into the shuttle. She looks around really quick. She doesn't see it. The audience doesn't see it. And so she buckles herself in with like 10 seconds to spare. She makes it out. Now, again, I don't know what kind of motors or horsepower that shuttle has, but she gets really far away from the Nostromo within 10 seconds
10
time.
seconds.
And it's like a space, atom bomb explosion, which
Yep.
is a, pretty impressive effect as well. So now everybody takes a breath. She has time to get out of her clothes and relax and kind of hang around. She puts Jones in the sleeper first, so he's all set. The alien is hiding within all the ductwork.
The pipe work, yeah.
Pipe work.
Genius.
Its head looks just like one of the pipes.
Yeah.
So you don't see it, even though you're looking right at it. The hand comes out, and that's another big jump scare that you've got.
Right.
So she's stuck in her underwear.
But now it's almost like lethargic. Like it takes a bit, like it's been super fast and able to take these people out. But in this scene, it's like slowly making its way out of the...
I think it realizes that it's there, just her and it. It's taking its time, and he knows it's a woman. So he's already done whatever it's done to Lambert. The teeth come out slowly as if he's trying to
intimidate
woo her or something. That's what it seems like.
Hey, baby, what you do?
That's why it's lethargic. It's got all the time in the world, to coin a phrase.
Well, if you bring up the fact that those two scenes mimic each other with the hands, they're both they're both in it for the self-preservation. She's trying to save her ass, and it's trying to save its. It probably knows that if I stay on that ship, I'm going to die. So this is my own way. If she's getting in here, I'm getting in there.
How intelligent is this thing? It knows that the ship is going to blow up, that it has to get in that shuttle with her. This is where Ripley gets into that spacesuit, and we see all that great detail that we missed earlier. And this is a completely white version of the suit as compared to the earth tones.
Because it probably hadn't been on a planet somewhere or out, working in the mine.
And so she gets the harpoon gun. She sits down. And this is where kind of you get the best view of the alien as she's hitting all these steam blasts at it to get it out of its hiding place. You're getting that strobe effect and the camera slowly closing in on the teeth and the hands moving all over the place. Yeah. And it is a very nightmarish kind of image of the alien. And this is, I think, for me, where the main difference lies between this and the other movies to come, because you had the handicap of knowing what these things look like. By the time you got to Aliens, the viewer was completely familiar with the physiology of the alien and what it was capable of. For this movie, you were not. So it was still very much new, and you're getting your first good look at it, and it's nightmarish coming out of this thing at you. And Ripley sings that song, My Lucky Star. Is she singing to Jones? Is she singing to herself? There's a lot of conjecture in all the articles I used to read about what that song meant. I think it's just, I don't know. Does everything need to mean something? But she's just singing this song. And I
feel like she's just trying to chant to herself so that she'll be lucky, right? It's not really that she's singing it. She's almost speaking it, Yep. She's going lucky, 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 and you hear her breath is really harsh. She's like, and
chant.
that adds to the tension of the scene because you feel her her extreme distress at this point.
Desperation. Yeah.
She waits until the thing is completely out of the wall, so it's doesn't have anything it can cling to until it's right behind her. She turns around in her helmet and it's right there. She sees the teeth about to burst through the glass of the helmet, and then she hits the button and it gets sucked out into space, but not before it grabs on and she has to hit it with a harpoon gun. Blasts it, and it finally is blown out into space once and for all. And that is the end of the movie.
I feel like we should talk about this point about Bolaji Badejo, the Nigerian actor who was inside the alien costume. He was cast because he had such a unique physical look. There's conflicting information. Some reports say he was 6'10", some say he was 7'2", but the point is that he was not short.
Yes.
And he was very slender. And he was not a dancer, but he moved with sort of these dance-like movements, which is one of the reasons too why Ridley cast him, so that he could look sort of elegant when he moved, so that you wouldn't necessarily get this monstrous sense, because that's what you're talking about, Jeff, where he starts to move sort of in slow motion. You see his hands kind of rotating, in this almost dance-like.
Yeah, and it plays into the design of it as well. It's not a lumbering beast. It's a very beautiful, organic creature that if it wasn't chasing you to eat, you'd be in awe of. You'd be like, that's unlike anything we've ever seen.
And this guy his limbs were extremely long. So Ridley Scott was very aware of the fact that if you had somebody like him in this costume, it wouldn't look like there was a man in this costume.
Right.
He had impossibly long arms. So his arms were that long, and I think they lucked out. They found him in a pub. One of the casting people saw him in a pub in England, in London somewhere, and said, "How would you like to be in the movies?" And that was,
how would you like to be in a movie? This guy's like, I'm going to be a movie star, and then they stick him in this costume. He's like, yeah, that's me. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So he looked otherworldly
Before
without the costume on, right? So
Yeah.
they just had a man of regular height and build in there. It wouldn't have worked. With the closing credits, that lush score coming back, that everything is all right. And we wouldn't get a sequel for 7 years. And I remember articles coming out immediately in Famous Monsters, like their opinions of what the sequel would be. Well, it's in Jones. It has to be in the cat.
That's funny because I just saw that cover that I'm looking at that I bought on the newsstand, and it actually says information concerning Aliens 2. So yeah, I'm assuming this was a big hit, and they were already.
Oh yeah, it was. It was. It cost only $11 million to make the budget. Ridley Scott apparently had to pull blood from a stone to get $11 million. The reports of what it made. They vary widely because of the re-releases and what have you, but it's anywhere between 106 and 200 million worldwide. So again, it more than made its money back. Alan Ladd, who was the president of 20th Century Fox, was fascinated, probably just as much as we were, by Alien, and he wanted to make a sequel right away. But he was either fired or stepped down, and a new president came on who didn't see the worth in an Alien sequel. So that's why it took so many years until there was a new regime in Fox to get the Aliens made. As people know, it was not in Jones, so that was a red herring. So it was just Ripley going back to LV-426.
Right.
But yeah, this movie just means so much to me. It's a huge part of my childhood. It may be the taboo aspect of it, of not being able to see it as a kid, but being in the know, being like a fanboy even back then.
Right.
And being able to speak on a subject like this without ever seeing it until years later. I remember when it did premiere on HBO, I wasn't allowed to watch it from my parents, but because my parents, among their friends, were the only ones with HBO, the night the Alien premiered, they invited their friends over, and they all watched it, and I had to go to bed early. But I sat there and listened.
Wow.
But it is such a major part of my childhood. I can't talk about it enough, that it brings back those memories of being a kid again, and watching something that I shouldn't be watching, I think, is the feeling that I most get when I watch it, and just the beauty of it. What struck me on this viewing was the beauty of the shots of LV-426 itself.
Yeah.
Those wonderful vistas of the Nostromo approaching the planet, and it's got those Saturn-like rings around it. One of the perfect examples of film, I think, that we have. And I would not hesitate to give it more than $5 if that system went. It goes to 11, baby. It goes to 11.
There you go. I'll back in that.
Yeah, this is one of my top 5 films, probably. Usually I'd say, in no particular order: Jaws, Alien, The Thing, The Host, and Night of the Living Dead. So yeah, that's definitely up there.
Yeah. So those, and I assume that you would give $5 to all 5 of those.
Yeah, I would for
titles.
sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Just hold on to your pants when I talk about The Host, okay? Because
I've got it upstairs. I got it. I already picked it up from the library.
Am I going to have to buy suspenders for that episode?
Oh my!
Because I definitely feel that way about The Host, is kind of the way you feel about Alien, even though it's a more recent film. I don't remember, like I said, the first time I saw this, but I think I had to have seen it at a sleepover, because that's when I saw all the horror movies. Was at somebody else's house where their parents didn't monitor too closely what we were watching, or they had an older sibling who would go out and rent, the rated R movies from the video store. This is how we're from a different era of when we used to go to the store to rent videotapes. Because I remember, seeing Nightmare on Elm Street, at a sleepover, and numerous other really bad and forgettable horror movies like Witchboard.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I remember seeing John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness at a sleepover. So
with Alice Cooper, right?
Yes, with Alice Cooper. So probably I saw Alien, at somebody's house at a sleepover, because that was, when I saw all the horror movies and watched them at home.
I made this comment in more than one episode, which was I used to do this inappropriate movie night with my daughter. And my wife used to get mad at me. And I said, what were you doing when you were like 13 years old? You were at your friend's house watching movies on HBO that you knew you shouldn't be watching, but there was no parental supervision. So,
right.
Yeah, I guess we were all in the same boat, right? I was just at my grandfather's house with the volume way down low.
Right. I was in a room full of girls screaming.
I wish I was in a room full of girls screaming. That was not the case at all.
Because we'd all be in our sleeping bags, like sort of huddled together, like,
right.
Screaming together when things happened.
Yeah.
Although there's always one person who would laugh. Inappropriately laugh.
Right, because you're like, I'm so nervous, I don't know what else to do. Yeah, nice.
So, all
right, I think we did it justice.
But just to talk about, I want to bring this back because I love Aliens just as much as anybody else does. So I was only kidding when I said Aliens in no way is this good. They're different movies.
They are. Yeah, and we didn't take it that way.
Yeah, and
James Cameron's not giving you a cease and desist right now.
And you couldn't make Alien again, I think, just because of this uniqueness. I think they had to go in that action adventure vein direction with Aliens to make it a different experience.
Right. Otherwise,
trying to replicate Alien wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't.
No.
And I think too, like the pacing just would not have even been allowed later on. There was a lot of studio interference on this movie. In the featurettes on the DVD, they're talking about how the first day on the set there were like 8 Fox executives, leaning over Ridley Scott's shoulder saying like, hurry up, shoot faster.
Oh yeah, he was notorious for his long setups.
Like, do more. And he was like, I'm shooting as fast as I can. And they were constantly trying to, kind of pull the rug out from under him. Like, you don't need that set. You can't build it, and it's
stories like that fascinated me, that movies even get made with so many fingers in a pot.
It's so interesting though, because later, if you guys know the story about Alien 3 and what happened on the shooting of Alien 3 with Fincher, it was the exact same situation, except Fincher was sort of unable to push back and get his vision of the film made the way that Ridley Scott was. It was almost the exact same situation where the studio was in there every second saying, no, you don't need this, no, cut that,
right?
No, and he was so ground down by like the studio pressure, he sort of ended up just sort of shrinking inside himself and not being able to get his vision of the film on screen.
One more thing, I don't know if this is true or not. I read this online, but speaking of studio interference, this may be a case where that's a good thing, because reportedly, Ridley Scott wanted the movie to originally end with the alien beheading Ripley and then recording the log detail in her voice at the end of the movie. That's how he wanted to end. That would just be completely deflating for...
Yes, correct. Yeah, that...
It violates the final girl rules, because at the end of the movie, Ripley is the final girl from every horror movie. And that would definitely be violating the tropes of the genre, for her to die like that. However, that would be like a very Night of the Living Dead type ending.
Yeah. Yes, it would.
Yeah.
Just the fact that the alien would be able to speak with
correct. All of a sudden he's like, this is Ripley.
So, but again, I only read this online. This was in none of the bonus features, so I don't even know if it's true. But who knows? So, 5 bucket, fanfare, the whole deal. Before we move on to What's Up, Doc, Jeff, you had alluded to an action figure that was produced for Alien.
We have the commercial?
We have the commercial.
Awesome.
Now, I received this as a Christmas gift, December 1979. I had this for maybe 4 years before it fell off of my prominent place on my dresser, head first, hit the floor, and shattered.
Ooh. Not a very sturdy toy.
Not a very sturdy toy. And I was heartbroken. It was there next to my Godzilla that the fist shot off and Shogun Warriors. And I had Alien right next to it. They all fell
That's a
I think
trophy
maybe
case.
I was there with a friend of mine, and we were horsing around, and
Of course.
and I bumped into the dresser,
Yeah.
and they all fell off, and none of them broke except the alien.
Yikes.
And to this day, I look at these things on eBay, and my fists raised to the sky. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
And even a couple years ago, they remade a duplicate, and it's more expensive than the stupid.
It's
original.
more expensive than the originals on eBay. It's $500 to buy the duplicate.
That's crazy. Come on.
So I found the original commercial for your
Awesome.
listening pleasure. So after the break, we're going to come back with Jeff's pick for our episode 100.
Ooh, what a segue.
What's up, Doc? So here we go.
What's up, Doc?
Kenner presents new alien action figure.
Bayonets glow! Quick, shut the L off! The alien's locked out now! He got through! Shh! Give up! Alien can't be beat! We'll zap him with the light! Don't, he'll destroy the spaceship! We've lost! Better find another ship! Let's try the kitchen! Another triumph for Alien!
Alien action figure. New from Kenner.
Men, there's a drive-in movie full of juicy people. Wow! It's a trap! Help! It's Pick! We've had it, men.
A pleasant aroma for you, but not for mosquitoes. Pick is easy to use. Light it and forget it. The exclusive aluminum-lined ashtray top means not an ash falls on the dash. Pick's aroma keeps mosquitoes, gnats, and sandflies away. Pick is the best protection for barbecues, fishing and camping trips, or just relaxing in the yard. No more sleepless nights or mosquito bites. Pick is harmless to children and pets, too.
So if you don't want our company ever anywhere, just like Pick and see what I mean? Bye!
Pick is on sale at the refreshment stand now.
Okay, we're back. Now, Jeff, you've got to take this away.
First of all, I want to ask, is this your first viewing of this movie, Jim?
I didn't think that it was, but I think confused this with another movie called What's Up, Pussycat. And so I thought that this movie was that, which is with George Segal, not
George
Ryan
Segal,
O'Neill.
Right.
It was the first time, although I do have a specific memory of that famous scene with the ladder during the chase in San Francisco, and everybody missing the ladder, and then it finally goes over and it breaks the plate glass. And so I saw that many times, but I don't know if I saw it as part of this movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Christina?
Yeah, so I was my mom was a huge Barbra Streisand fan, so I feel like I must have seen it when I was young, but I didn't have a memory of seeing it. I mean, I've seen other Peter Bogdanovich films, since then that I'm a fan of. So it was, for all intents and purposes, it was the first time.
First. Gotcha.
Yeah.
This is probably one of those movies, like I said, there's a handful of these movies that just ran ad nauseum on HBO. Never saw it in a theater. But it's probably my favorite comedy ever. And it's so outside of, like, when you talk to me about movies, and I'll talk Star Wars or whatever and Star Trek and all these other geek nerdy things. But this movie I just absolutely love. I adore. And I'm glad that we finally get to at least talk about it. It's kind of a weird pairing. Like when we were coming up to this 100th episode, it was just like, all right, you know what? Screw it. It's our show. Let's talk about whatever we want. Because there's probably a point where this will never pair with something else. We're never going to talk Yentl. We're never going to talk any of these other movies that may even tie into it remotely. So I'm happy you guys got to watch it. I'm thrilled that I got to watch it again.
You know what would have been a good pairing with this? Would have been Young Frankenstein.
Young Frankenstein? Yeah, well, there's how many cast members are in this that show up in Young?
Yeah, that's why.
Especially Kenneth Mars. Yeah, you're right.
Kenneth Mars, Madeline Kahn. Yeah.
Yep. So my disc did have like a little behind-the-scenes documentary with Peter Bogdanovich, and they're showing the making of this, and this guy was so influenced by Keystone Cops and Laurel and Hardy and the Marx Brothers. as a kid growing up, and he really wanted to kind of recapture those kind of slapstick screwball comedies. And then the poster even says it, you remember screwball comedies, kind of a thing. I've always had a thing for girls with big noses, and I think this is the genesis of it, because she is absolutely adorable. I couldn't take, even when I was watching it yesterday, I couldn't take my eyes off her. She is like, her character is a straight up force of nature. And Ryan O'Neal plays this so straight, like he is the straight man. And he's just thrust into this girl's world, or she thrusts herself into his world. But I still laugh at all the jokes. I mean, the dialogue, again, we talked about Buck Henry. He got best comedy written for screen, Academy Award for this movie. I just absolutely love this. It's a fun, silly, over the top movie. And again, I haven't seen it in years, but I know it inside. And I was like reciting lines of dialogue.
Yeah. I can see why I would have liked this as a kid. Somehow remember What's New Pussycat, or is it What's Up Pussycat, or What's New Pussycat?
I think it's What's Up
That's
Pussycat,
more of an adult movie, because I remember that outfit that she has on with the hands over her breast. That's that's more adult.
What's Up Pussycat? Isn't that a Tom Jones song?
Faster?
It is, yeah. I think that was the theme song to that movie.
Yeah.
This movie, I think as a kid, it would much more appeal to kids, because think of it, it's an innocent male fantasy where the dork, your nerd character, which is Ryan O'Neal, meets his fantasy girl, but for the right reasons, not because he wants to sleep with her, but because she likes all the same things that he does.
Well,
she knows
she's
about
super intelligent, right? She really is. I mean, even
so it's like as a kid, you're like, oh, that's they're going to be boyfriend and girlfriend because they both like
and I
rocks.
think that's part of what I did like about
it. It's a very innocent kind of a movie.
Yeah, I mean, outside of they kiss at the end, but there's really nothing. There's no other overtures to anything. Well, you either had Judy or you have Eunice. So, and this is Madeline Kahn's first movie.
And she plays the same character that she does in Young Frankenstein, too.
Frankenstein.
The browbeating fiance. Yeah.
But which is weird, because I looked it up, because I'm like, how old were they during this movie? Because she really is Barbara Streisand. She was like 30 years old. He was 30, and I think he was 31.
I want to point out that Ryan O'Neal was like one of the biggest male stars on the planet, because he just came off that Love Story.
Love Story. Yeah.
The year before that this was made. And they even ape that at the end of this movie.
Well, I was going to say, as a kid, I never picked up on that reference, but yeah, they do make a little jab at it. It just, like I said, the dialogue is just off the charts. I mean, the minute we're met with O'Neal's character, Howard Bannister, and his fiance, Madeline Kahn, who plays Eunice, and they're on their way to this symposium. He's going to get an award he's up for an award, the Larrabee Foundation Award or whatever, and he's got this satchel of rocks, and he's got the little tuning fork, and he's pitching it, and Eunice is just browbeating him the whole way, and he's in the cab, and she grabs it or whatever. He goes, "Stop touching my rocks." And the cab driver turns around and he goes, "I know how you feel, mister." He goes, "I hate it when my indignious rocks are even touched." And I'm just like, here we go. It's just silly dialogue, but.
And Ryan O'Neal breaks the fourth wall.
Yes, constantly.
Numerous times. Movie. So it doesn't take itself seriously at all.
No.
Like a screwball comedy, which is...
It is. And like I said, she is just a force of nature as a character.
And it is like, the plot is like, a Three's Company plot, where there's four identical plaid bags, and it's like a mix and match of all the different characters. One has jewels. And Boss Hogg, I would like to point out. Yeah, I was going to say,
Sorrel Book,
as the security guard. As Roscoe Pico trained. So we got jewels in one bag. We've got the rocks in another. Then we've got Barbara Streisand's clothes in the third bag. And what was in the fourth bag?
Mrs. Van Hoskins' jewelry.
The secret.
Oh, you said
the secret.
The top
files.
secret documents. Oh, I didn't hear you say jewelry.
So we've got people. They're being mixed. So they're chasing, all the different characters are chasing the bag that they want throughout this movie. And in the background, Judy Maxwell's character is trying to ingratiate herself into Ryan O'Neal's life, because for some, you don't know why. You can tell why he would be attracted to her, but you don't really know why she's attracted to him.
No, but the minute she sees him in the lobby, she's kind of like, hello.
Yeah. Maybe because she's been to, 10 or 20 colleges or however many
don't know.
that she's
Right.
been expelled from, and that
Yeah.
she realizes that he is a soulmate of some kind.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, it's just lots of silly jokes. I really was reminded of It's a Mad, 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 Mad
Yes,
World
correct, right, which
watching
came
this.
out
And
much
that was
earlier
one of
than
my
this, but-
favorite
Yeah.
movies as a kid.
And that's a
I
huge
love that.
ensemble movie where it's
Yeah.
just madcap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I agree. She is completely adorable. I looked at her in a whole new light in this movie, Barbara Streisand.
Yeah, and she was coming off Funny Girls, I think, which was before this. But,
Hello, Dolly, Funny
Hello,
Girl.
Dolly,
She had
Funny
a
Girl.
run of movies in
Yeah.
the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, and I think there's that scene toward the end where they come out of the costume shop and she's got that big floppy hat on, which is kind of reminiscent of Funny Girl costume.
Playing Larrabee, who is going to give however much the grant is to all these different candidates, played by Austin Pendleton, who is the definitive 70s guy. He's just like those birds in Alien. You shouldn't see him outside of the 70s, I think.
I think he was a prototype for Austin Powers, though.
Now, he was one of the main... this is how we can tie this into Alien. He was in the Muppet movie.
Muppet
Austin
movie.
Pendleton.
Ah, there you go. Yes.
He was the guy that had a change of heart because that one character wanted Kermit's frog's legs for his restaurant.
Yes, Doc Hopper.
And
Doc
Hopper,
won.
this was
Yep.
Doc Hopper's sidekick. And at the end, he had a change of heart, and he was sided with the Muppets at the end of the movie.
There you go.
So now, Jeff, this is a 5-bucket movie for you?
This is absolutely a 5-bucket movie for me.
Obviously, we know how you saw it. You saw it on HBO. Is this nostalgic for you? Does it bring you back to that space?
No, I don't. No, because I don't remember, like, if I was at my grandfather's house or if I was at my, my house when we did have HBO for a short amount of time. But it just tickles me to no end. When you see a movie like this at a certain age, I think like this kind of like informs my, like, what I find funny, as my personality and my humor. Like, this is the stuff that I reacted to. So when I see it now, it still makes me laugh, even though I know it's coming. The whole scene where we're introduced to Kenneth Mars' character, who he just absolutely kills it in this, and he's got this over the top, and at the end where they meet the judge, and he goes, "Who are you?" He goes, "I am Hugh." He goes, "You're me? I am Hugh. You are me?" Like stupid stuff like that. It's childish, but it just. And like you said, it is, for lack of a better term, an episode of Three's Company. It's just, miscommunication. Everyone's got the exact same bag,
And then get to the point, even the judge ends up being her father at the end.
Right, correct. I mean, that's the punchline to the whole thing, which is, you young lady, you seem to be the center of all this. What do you have to say for yourself? And she goes, "Hello, Daddy." And then the bench just collapses.
Which is that's I think where the Mad World aspect of it.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing, which is it's silly, but like these escapades and these little adventures that just keep escalating till you finally get to that big chase scene at the end where everyone is after each other in the cars. That scene where they're taking the cars down the staircase, they did not have permits for that.
No,
and it actually damaged the stairs, and you can still see the damage if you go there today. They never fixed them. They're like, that's where Barbara Streisand drove down the street.
The movies from the early 70s, 60s have a different look to them, mostly because of the Technicolor process.
Right. Yeah.
It just lent a sheen of like unreality to movies.
Yes. Yeah.
Just movies like this kind of bring you into a certain nostalgic mind frame as well. Did you know that Sylvester Stallone has a
Yes, he's got a background cameo. I didn't know that until I read that, but I guess he is in the background of one of the chase scenes or whatever.
I enjoyed it. I laughed out loud a couple of times.
It's actually the third highest grossing movie of 72.
Yeah,
right
it re-released in 73 and 75 again theatrically.
We can't talk about it for 2 hours like we did Alien. There's not that much there's not that much meat to chew on. It's a silly screwball comedy. I loved it. I'm happy I got to see it again. I don't know. Yeah. Christina's pretty quiet, so I don't even know if she appreciated it.
So there's a very unfortunate thing that happened, like, as I started watching this movie, which is I didn't know too much about the film. I was just, I was like, oh, Peter Bogdanovich film, Barbra Streisand, and I love Last Picture Show and I love Paper Moon, but I had not seen this, or like I said, I don't remember seeing it. One film that I have seen many, many times, probably too many times to count in my life, is Bringing Up Baby. And I love Bringing Up Baby. And I started watching this movie, and I'm like, there's a professor who needs funding. He's got a straight-laced fiance. There's like a wacky girl who comes in and sort of like takes over his life. And then there's a mix-up in Bringing Up Baby. It's leopards. In here, it's bags. And I was like, this is Bringing Up Baby. And then, so what ended up happening was I'm watching the whole movie, and I'm sort of subconsciously comparing it to Bring Up Baby. Right. So I think possibly I thought Barbra Streisand was really cute in this movie. But I kept comparing Ryan O'Neal to Cary Grant, which is very unfortunate because he came up really short in the comparison. I love Ryan O'Neal. Because it was, I love him in Paper Moon. There's a thing that Cary Grant does in Bringing Up Baby where he just has this kind of frenetic energy, even though he's the straight guy. And Ryan O'Neal was so straight in this film that I couldn't help it. I was just sort of subconsciously comparing them. Yeah. And I think I didn't enjoy it quite as much because of that. And then, I don't know, if you guys watch special features, I'm sure you've seen interviews with Peter Bogdanovich. He's like, he knew everybody in old Hollywood. Like, if you ever watch like a John Ford movie, a Howard Hawks movie, anything, there's always an interview with Bogdanovich. Alfred Hitchcock, he knew everybody. And so after I watched the movie, I dug up this Filmstruck interview. I don't know if you guys saw it. That was done a few years ago when that Filmstruck streaming channel was on. Mm-hmm. It was Criterion and Turner Classic Movies had formed a streaming service. And he talked about his early films. And he talked about how he called up Cary Grant because he knew him. He knew everybody. And he said, will you be willing to give Ryan some tips for the movie?
Oh, geez.
And so he sent Ryan O'Neal over to see Cary Grant, and Ryan O'Neal came back, and Peter Bogdanovich said, well, what advice did he give you? And Ryan O'Neal said, he told me to wear silk underpants.
Yeah, I did see that. I did see that. Now go kill him, kid.
like that was it. And he was like, that was it. He's like, yeah, that's all he told me. And then Cary Grant told Peter Bogdanovich, when the movie comes out, you know, go to Radio City Music Hall and wear a raincoat and a hat and sunglasses and stand in the last row and listen to 6,500 people laugh at your movie. It'll do your heart good. Bogdanovich does these crazy imitations of all of these
the people that he's
actors and direct. Right. He does like a Cary Grant voice when he tells a story.
Behind the scenes featurette there, he seemed very he seemed like just a fun guy to work with. Mm-hmm. He really just seemed, very open to whatever, and he was happy. He was happy to be there. He was, And
if you listen, I love listening to him talk because he did know everybody. He knew Howard Hawks. Right. He knew John Ford. That was how he got Ben Johnson into Last Picture Show, was because he knew John Ford. I always enjoy listening to him talk about the process of the film. And when he was talking about What's Up, Doc, he said he gave Barbra Streisand some line readings for some scenes. And her agent came to him afterwards and was like, what are you doing trying to give Barbra Streisand a line reading? And he was like, well, I just was, directing. And then there's the scene where she sings on the piano.
Yep.
And he told her to emphasize like a certain word in the song. And she's like, you're trying to give me a song reading now? I think probably she knows more about that than you do.
Right, you could picture her saying that. You're trying to give me a song reading now?
So I think possibly I enjoyed the behind-the-scenes stories of
better than the movie.
More than I enjoyed the movie because I do like to listen to Bogdanovich. Sure. But I mean, it's not that it's not enjoyable. Like, it's a diversion. But like, I don't have like the same emotional attachment.
No, correct. I knew that going in, that it's not.
And I'm such a fan of Bringing Up Baby. It just, once the comparison sort of like locked into my brain, I couldn't help like
separate them.
Comparing them.
So I'm assuming Bringing Up Baby came first.
Yeah.
That's
30s.
like a black and white.
50s.
It's Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. It's Howard Hawks' film. It's like very typical of the Howard Hawks like comedy era. where like, yeah, there's just sort of like gag after gag after
Right,
gag
yeah,
after
yeah,
gag, and it's like very frenetic. Once I sort of got that in my head,
Right, sure. How can you not?
it was hard not to compare them.
Yeah.
And because of that, the pacing for What's Up, Doc seemed a little off to me because it was a little bit slower
Right. Gotcha.
than I would have expected for that.
Well, I guess I have to
kind
do
of
some
film.
homework. Maybe I'll go watch
Yeah.
that. If you remade this movie, like who would you cast as Judy with that kind of
Zoe
charisma?
Deschanel.
Zoe Deschanel.
Ooh.
Zoe
Yeah.
Deschanel, Will
Yeah.
Ferrell. Yeah. Bring an
Jeez.
elf reunion, right?
There you go. Yeah. Well, I was thinking look-wise it would be Jennifer Aniston, but I like your answer better because I think she's got more personality and acting chops.
Mm-hmm. And also she has that like sort of like adorable
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
quality.
Yep.
You know, that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Barbra Streisand is great in this film. You know, she really kind of, you could see she sort of threw herself into it.
Right.
And we didn't mention
Anyways.
about the Looney Tune connection.
Yeah,
in
the
What's
Bugs
Up,
Bunny
Doc.
itself,
Yeah.
which I
Even
guess
on
as
the-
a kid I never I'm like, how do they even do that? But it was Warner Brothers, so it was
Right.
like, yeah, they own that.
Yeah, she's eating a
So-
carrot on the movie poster.
Yeah, I know. That's
Oh,
what I'm saying.
yeah.
The point that early on where she's stalking him in the.
So,
That you were referencing earlier, Jim, where you talked about, so they referenced the line from Love Story, love always means never having to say you're sorry.
Right.
And in the interview I watched Bogdanovich, he talked about they actually had a cross cut in the film release of that film because they knew there was going to be a big laugh after that scene, and people wouldn't hear
Gotcha.
what Ryan O'Neal
Yep.
said after. So there was a little cross cut that was inserted because it was
Just
going to
for
get
that
such a
pause,
big laugh.
right.
So that people could hear what his
Right.
response would be, but then they took it out for the DVD or the video
Really?
release.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
And
so
his
here's
response
another my
was-
final. This is my final attempt at a connection. It just came to me that something one of you guys said made me think of this. But Barbra Streisand's character latches herself onto Ryan O'Neal, much
like
like the facehugger on
Wow.
the
face
King.
hugger.
So there you go.
She's a parasite. Oh, there we go.
There's our connection.
Nice.
So this brings us to our confessional this week.
Confessionals.
Now, this was two of our picks for our episode 100. Obviously, two of our favorite films. For the confessional, I was thinking we could all go in the completely opposite direction. Again, favorites of ours, but these, we would admit to ourselves and to everyone else that these are not good movies, but we love them anyway. So I have a plethora that I can choose from.
I was gonna say. So what constitutes bad in your mind?
Just, well, something that...
I mean, we're talking box office numbers, or are we talking
No,
Rotten Tomato
I'm talking about
scores?
something that might be considered a B movie. Something that is
so-
on Rotten Tomatoes is like
so we're
20%.
talking like Heaven's Gate, Ishtar,
Something like in the general
Battlefield, or
perception of the public
Howard the
is a
Duck.
bad movie. That's
Gotcha.
Yes,
Okay.
Howard the Duck would be a perfect
Okay.
example.
All right.
Who would like to venture forth with their pick?
I want to hear yours first.
You want to hear mine
Jim.
first?
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
go, Jim.
Okay, so now when I say I've got a plethora to choose from, like I am a child of PIX, WOR, the 430 movies that were cheaply obtained to run in syndication, and these are probably the lowest of the low. Now, when I say that, you did see some quality on these channels. Like you would get the Hammer horror movies, you'd get the Universal horror movies, but you'd also get a lot of Drek that was just played on Saturday afternoons and on weekdays. And I saw a lot of this stuff over and over again because, again, what they offered you on television is all that you saw. You didn't have VCRs back in the 70s.
Right.
Your choices were limited, so you just watched what the networks deemed worthy of putting out there on the airwaves. So a lot of it was B movie trash that hardly played in the theaters but made its way to television. And one of the things that I saw over and over again that frightened me and fascinated me at the same time was a piece of crap called Laser Blast. And now I don't know if either of you are familiar with this.
This
No.
does not ring a bell. No.
Now, in order for me to pick something, I had to go look at my DVD shelf. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of movies I can think of, but is there anything that I actually bought and I have on my DVD shelf that I can say is a completely bad movie? And there it was, looking me right in the face, Laser Blast. So
Blast.
this is the story, and it's came out in 1977, like on the heels of Star Wars, right? So this is one of those movies that is kind of tried to cash in, I think. And it's a kid that is browbeaten by his parents. He's supposed to be 17 or 18, but he looks about 26 or 27. Played by Kim Milford, who is the guy from Corvette Summer, the bad guy from Corvette Summer.
Yeah, okay.
And so he goes into the desert after his parents yell at him, and his girlfriend's father tells him to get out of their house. And he's walking around, and he sees a giant gun in the desert. And earlier on, you see the worst claymation aliens that have ever been committed to film have left this gun. After they visited this spot in the desert, they left this gun there. And he finds it, puts it on his arm. And whenever he puts it on his arm, because it's like a gun that fits over your forearm, it starts to take him over. It's almost like the Christine, the Stephen King story with the car, like how the Arnie is possessed by the driver of the car.
But with more bullets.
So every time, so he takes this gun and he uses it as a method of revenge to kill all the bullies and everybody else that's browbeaten him throughout the movie. And he's changing into a monster a little bit more and more and more as the movie goes on, until the aliens finally come back at the very end, and in a huge finale, he's got a shootout with the aliens, and they take their gun back. And that's basically the plot of this movie. And at one point, when he's in full monster alien mode, he shoots this guy in a van and takes over his van, and he's driving with the laser gun out the window, and he sees a billboard of Star Wars. And he blows up the billboard of Star Wars, as if they're saying that we're so much better than
we're
Star
better.
Wars.
Haha, I'll show you. And wait, what's the name of this movie again? You've brought
Laser
this up.
Blast.
You brought this up. You've brought this up before.
Also starring Eddie Deason, who we recently saw in 1941, and who famously says, Herbesheimus in the Polar Express.
Yes.
And also has a cameo from Roddy McDowell, who we just talked about in The Black Hole. So it's got some B-movie cred to it. But it's just so bizarre and so weird and so bad that I kind of love it. And that's my pick for... And so here's my point with asking this confessional of myself and of you, that eventually that we're going to cover all three of these movies that we're talking. So
it's bad movie week.
Yeah.
I'm all on board for Laser Blast.
Okay.
That's digging deep because I've never heard of it. So.
But will they have it at the library? That's the question.
Well, that is the good question.
It's probably on YouTube.
Question.
I wouldn't be surprised. It's probably on YouTube for all to see for free.
All right. Christina, want to go next?
Okay, so it's funny because this is the first movie that pops into my head. I know that I've liked other objectively bad movies, but a movie that I remember watching more than once because it was on HBO, and then because my mom recorded it, so I watched the videotape over and over, was Ice Pirates.
Oh,
yes.
I haven't thought of that in decades.
Oh, watch that again.
And I watched that movie, I don't know how many times. It's
You're
dumb.
right,
It's so freaking dumb.
It is dumb, but it was, but it was on. Oh yeah, at the end where the time is speeding up and you're getting old.
Or the space herpes.
Yes,
I mean, it's just ridiculous. So it's got Robert Urich in it, which if you're a child of the '80s, he was on Spencer for Hire.
Yeah.
Spencer.
And Mary Crosby, and actually Ron Perlman's in it. And
is he?
And Angelica Houston. And and it's got the thinnest sort of construct of a plot, where there's this organization that's controlling all the water in the universe, and to the extent where they're actually blowing up planets that have a lot of water so that they can sort of continue to control the flow of this resource. And then there are these pirates who go out and try to steal ice because water is this valuable commodity. And it's such a ridiculous film. And I went and looked it up because I thought this movie had to have flopped, right? But apparently it made money. Apparently it was profitable for the studio. It had a very low budget, and it made its money back.
Nice.
But yeah, that's it's like I said, it's just such a dumb Such a dumb movie.
What
but I watched
year?
it.
Is it 84?
80s?
I think it's 80. I think it's 84 or 85.
Okay.
Yeah, it's mid 80s.
Yeah, I think I was gonna say I was still in high school. 'Cause I remember my friend John Eckenstern. He saw it. Like his dad used to take him to the movies all the time, and he would come in and basically tell me the entire plot of the movie. Like every week he'd come back, and I do remember Ice Pirates. And
Like
yeah,
the guy
it was,
the guy you work with now, right?
yeah, except unsolicited. Both these movies I'm looking forward to. You guys may hate this one because like, again, I'm going through the list. Like you want to just look at like worst movies, and like you said, Jim, you go through your what you own, and I almost went with Death Race 2000, but I can't deem that a bad movie. I actually like it a lot.
I think that's like kind of a cult.
It is.
favorite.
I didn't
Death Race
want to put it. I didn't
2000.
want to put it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to put it in the bad movie category. I have very fond memories of seeing that as a double feature with Jaws and The Drive-In. So I didn't go that route, but I did go with this other stupid movie that I try to watch at least once a year. And I don't own it, but you can usually find it. It came out in '64, and it's a Christmas movie. It is called Santa Claus Conquers the Martians.
I've seen this movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have seen this movie.
It is. It is like MST3K.
It is. It's a Mystery Science Theater.
Oh, did they actually? How could they not?
I own it as the Mystery Science Theater
really?
version. Yeah.
Okay, but I love this movie because it's all about these these Martians who become obsessed with Santa Claus, so they kidnap him.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got these two Martians that are just bumbling idiots, just like the two guys out of Hidden Fortress. And the kids, Santa Claus and the kids are like the heroes. And they have to say, the kids.
So you're saying that you can actually watch this without the Mystery Science Theater?
Yes,
I didn't think that it was available.
Yeah, no, yeah.
I actually
I don't
have
own
it.
it.
I own it.
Do you
in
own it?
a super weird box set that I got like several years ago, like one of those DVD like bins,
Like
like discounted things.
Right.
It was like 50 horror movies, and it had all these cheap sort of like films that were like probably not copyrighted or owned by any.
Maybe Laser Blast
studio.
is in there. You should look
There
at
might
it.
be. I'll go look.
Yeah.
It might be in there, but yes, I actually own this movie. So that would be
Okay,
easier
that's
for me to
awesome.
watch than Jim's movie.
And I don't think I've ever seen the Mystery Science Theater riff on it. Yeah, I can normally find it on some weird TV station somewhere around Christmas.
Now, Jeff,
time.
did you consider picking this for your Christmas movie for our special?
No, actually, it didn't come up for some reason. It didn't even dawn on me. But once I started, because I was really gonna go like with Con Air, like some stupid Nick Cage movie that every time it's on, I gotta watch it. But again,
Right.
I don't really deem them. It's probably a box office success. There's a lot of big name stars in it or whatever. The fact that Christina owns it's awesome.
Actually have it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Do you own Ice Pirates, Christina?
Yeah, I do. On
do.
videotape.
Wow.
Do you still do you have a means to watch it then?
I have I still have a VCR. Yeah, I can't tell you how bad VCR tapes
Quality.
look on an HD TV. Like when we had an older TV, it was okay, but now it's like it looks so
I know
grainy.
we're so spoiled now, right? I mean,
I can't even watch a DVD anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
why?
I'm just spoiled with the Blu-ray.
Oh! I thought you meant
Oh.
technology-wise
no,
that
no.
you were
Yeah.
on. I was gonna say my PlayStation plays DVDs.
Yeah, no. It's like for the host. I know we're going to be covering that in a
Yeah.
couple weeks, and I have the DVD. I'm like, I want the Blu-ray now.
But I'll tell you.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you. Even like my copy of What's Up, Doc was a DVD. Now it looked like somebody ate a peanut butter sandwich on it, and I had to clean it from the library. But I mean, to me, the transfer was pretty damn impressive. But again, you were talking about that Technicolor aspect of older films, so it had that level of Christmas probably from the get-go.
So we're going to be covering these then in the weeks to come. I don't know how we're going to tie them in, but
Well, they're
I
all
thought-
kind of
Just a bad-
space movies. I mean, they're all sort of
I was gonna say,
space-ish
yeah,
movies.
yeah.
Yeah. So that leads us to our preview of next week's show. So Christina mentioned that she saw 1917. We're going to see that, and we're going to cover it next week along with Pan's Labyrinth. Now, Christina, you won't be with us next week to talk about this. Do you think that this is a good pairing, these two films?
Yeah, I think it is actually. Obviously, like the eras are close, but the 1917
Yeah, I think one's
is
World War I, World War II.
1917 is very beautifully shot, and I think you'll find it compares favorably to Pan's Labyrinth, just in a different way.
Very
But
good.
yeah,
Cool.
And then the following week, I believe that we're going to have you back again as our guest. So we're going to be covering The Host along with its sister feature, Parasite.
And you guys will not be able to stop me on this.
I'm very excited to see
I am
Parasite.
so excited to talk about these movies because I saw Parasite a couple weeks ago, actually almost 3 weeks ago now. It was crazy. You know, you guys talked about how like your local theater, it was only there for like a week and it was gone. And I said, you know, in the city, like it'll play here forever. Well, we went to see it on a Monday morning at 10:45 and the showing was sold out.
Wow.
Yeah.
But see, that shows you that's the word of mouth, because I'm seeing a lot more advertising for it and promotions, and you know they're really hyping it up.
You know, it was before the Golden Globe win. I actually saw it at the same theater that I saw The Host. Like there's for like mainstream movies, I go to Regal, and for anything that's like foreign, art house, that kind of thing, I either go to the Music Box, which is a theater down the street from me, or Landmark Century Theater, which is where I saw The Host. It's just like my Regal. They have recliners and they have like nice food and all this stuff, because all the theaters are trying to compete with each other, like the amenities. But yeah, they showed Jojo Rabbit there, and you know, I mean, I've seen so many. I saw Kung Fu Hustle there. I saw Bubba Hotep there.
That's a good bad.
We've never done that one either.
No, that is a good bad movie.
You know, it's crazy about Bubba Hotep. Like I own it, so I've watched it a million times. But when I first saw it in the theater, I saw it with Bruce Campbell was there, because he was road showing the film with the Landmark chain, and I found that out later because last year I saw the film again at the Music Box Theater with Don Coscarelli. And I was like, it's so crazy that the only time I've ever seen this film in the theater, I saw it with the star and the director.
And the director.
And Don Coscarelli is an amazingly kind person. Like if you're a fan, like he's really so awesome.
Did you ask him about Phantasm?
Actually, Bubba Hotep is my favorite film of his, but like there were so many Phantasm nerds on the line. I think
like let me change this up a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, people carrying, you know, like Phantasm art and, you know, all kinds of
That's
stuff.
That's another one I haven't seen in years, and probably saw it on HBO.
Yeah, that is just like an off-the-wall horror movie.
Yeah, the little Jawas.
Have you read his biography? Because that's why I saw him last year. So he wrote an autobiography.
No.
And it's, you know, about his life in film. And he had a really funny interview after Bubba Hotep where he talked to, you know, had little anecdotes about things. He talked about making Beastmaster. You know, he talked.
He did Beastmaster? I didn't realize that.
Damn. He's my hero now.
He's talked about Phantasm. I could have picked Beastmaster actually as a bad movie. That could have been a choice because that was one that I saw a lot as a kid.
So next week, 1917, Pan's Labyrinth.
Pants Labyrinth.
Pants Labyrinth. Yeah.
Yes.
Have you seen my pants?
Yes. You know, it's funny when you were talking Alien, you mentioned Jettison Kane. I was going to tell you that was one of my favorite movies.
Did I say Jettison Kane?
Yeah, when they jettison Kane. Forget it. Cut it out. And on that note, happy 100th, Jim. Yes. Thank you for joining us, Christina.
Thank you for letting me be be here for your 100th episode.
It's awesome.
And here's for 100 more.
There you go. I don't know. Can I take it? Can our fans take it?
Great stuff to come.
We're like wine.
We've only scratched the surface of the films that we would like to talk about.
It's funny because you think of all the stuff that we've talked about, and you're like, wow, what else can we talk about? And then immediately we pull like 50.
Yeah. So many rabbit holes yet to go down. So many. So, for those in the know about Christina's novels, that was a nod too.
There you go. You should get back to work. You sound like you should be really busy.
Me?
Yes.
I just handed in a book a month ago.
Get back to work, woman. Well, you teased us with that opening statement.
Yeah, you got that one sentence. Keep going.
That's right. She's like Snoopy. It was a dark and stormy night. Like 5 months go by. I got nothing else.
All right, guys. We've been talking for like 2 hours. I gotta eat.
You have to edit. All right. A pleasure. Yes.
Bye.
Bye. Manipulating bastards.